All right, we are live on my end. Go ahead, S-Man, and start it on yours.
Alrighty, hang on a second. It's gonna take a second because that's how Hangouts works.
Yeah, and apparently last week I had my brother trying to get into the stream, and I was I just kept hitting mute on my phone, and it was oblivious to the chat because I do that sometimes. My
Yeah.
bad, but maybe he will be joining us today.
All right.
Okay, are you live on your end?
Yeah, we've been live for like 15
Oh,
seconds.
okay. All right.
So we are live. I'm joined with HUMAnE. We're going to talk about Author-itty, or something along those lines, because I saw
Yeah.
him and BT in a Twitter fight about Chris Kyle and Edward Snowden. Uh, Chris Kyle is commonly ranked as a hero in the eyes of a lot of Americans. Uh, he killed a lot of people while in the military as a sniper,
Yeah.
and Edward Snowden is perhaps one of the most unpopular people in the United States for his actions as a whistleblower, um, which when I first heard of Edward Snowden, I thought he should have been executed as a traitor. But as
Mm.
time went on and I learned more about what exactly was going on, I cannot agree with that position anymore. I do
Yeah.
not believe in, you know, there's no arguments in my opinion that are justified for NSA spying, for wiretapping or spying when it's like unwarranted from the federal government, and I
Yeah.
thought that anyone who would throw shit at Edward Snowden for it, I thought was just as the ANCAPs like to say, a big government person or just a fucking statist. I didn't see that you either of you arguing about Chelsea Manning. I don't know if she's a separate case or.
No,
Uh,
similar situation. Although Chelsea Manning's case was a little different, because to the best of my knowledge, Chelsea Manning did not try to go through the proper channels prior to going through WikiLeaks. Edward Snowden did. There's proof of this. Tried using the inspector general. Tried using anonymous to get this information out. Nothing. No. It just kind of got shut down as it went up those chains that are supposed to be the chains that you use to highlight incidents. This is where you report your fraud, waste, and abuse. This is where you report incidents of your supervisor breaching protocols. Those are the proper channels because the inspector general is outside of your chain of command. So yeah, prior military. So the inspector general is outside of your chain of command. So if there's a problem with your chain of command, you report it to the inspector general, and they come down from the top. Whereas usually, if there's an incident, you report it to your direct supervisor, and then if it doesn't get resolved with the supervisor, then you go to their supervisor, so on up the chain. If the problem is your supervisor and or your chain of command, you go to the inspector general. So
mhm.
this is the case Snowden was in. Even though Snowden was not actual military, he was a contractor in that position. So he was a civilian, not active military. That's another instance where this is slightly different from Chelsea Manning. So Edward Snowden was you know, still had security clearance and all of that, but wasn't active duty military and all of that. So,
Yeah.
but Edward Snowden tried going through the proper channels. There is proof of him trying to use the inspector general, trying to use the platforms that exist to report this breach. They're breaking the law. They were lying to congressmen about what they were doing. So Edward Snowden tried using the proper channels. When nothing happened out of that, he took it into his own hands. He didn't go through WikiLeaks. He went through the press, which is the same way Deep Throat exposed Watergate. So
Yeah.
Snowden submitted his stuff anonymously and should have had the protection that Deep Throat experienced, because Deep Throat wasn't exposed until he was nearly on his deathbed. Like I think it was like 25 or 30 years after the Watergate incident that people had their suspicions about who Deep Throat was, and most of them were correct, but it wasn't confirmed until the guy was like in his 70s, 80s, probably 90s. I don't know how old the guy was actually when he died, but it was like, okay, well after the point where all of his political enemies are long gone, and nobody really it was no longer an issue. Whereas Snowden was exposed within weeks, And Snowden had to flee the country for fear of his life, not only from the government, because they were calling him a traitor and they wanted to put him in jail and all that sort of thing, but, I mean, assassinations still happen. There's whistleblowers, snitches get stitches, right? That's not just that's not just true in, urban and ghetto areas. That's true in politics. That's true in government. Snitches get stitches. And this is especially...
Or they'll be found in ditches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was especially true under Obama. And this is one thing that the media does not highlight and just kind of glosses over. Obama cracked down more on whistleblowers than any other president before him.
He promised a transparent government. He sounded off on whistleblowers and whatnot.
Yeah, whistleblowers got highly punished under the Obama administration, like Chelsea Manning, Snowden, and there's a bunch of members of the press, some others that we don't know the full details on, but there were I got to look up the exact numbers, but it's in the high 60s or more of people who were jailed for whistleblowing because they're exposing criminal activity or immoral acts, either in politics or in their big corporations or in some avenue that the public has a vested interest to know the truth. People who exposed the truth got punished. The people doing the wrong activities, nothing. Nothing happened to the NSA. Nothing happened. So Chelsea Manning's was a little bit different. So this is where we need to add nuance. So not only is there no evidence that we know of Chelsea Manning going through the proper channels to release this information. Secondly, Chelsea Manning was a member of the military and subject to the Universal Code of Military Justice. It's a different set of rules that is not applicable to civilians working for the government. So active duty military, much tighter constraints on what you can and cannot do legally. And also Manning really, really bad at hiding her identity at the time, his identity. Really, really bad. Like, I don't know if you saw the username submitted, but it was, I forget what it exactly was, but it was something, it was year of birth, and something tied to the Manning last name, and then some generic something, but you're like, it's like a username you would make on Xbox. That's like, I wonder who this Manning 85 was, and you're like, no, that's there's not that many people working in the secure environment who would have access to that information. Should we go after the one whose last name is in that username and has the same birth date? So anyway, terrible at hiding their identity when going through WikiLeaks. So as soon as that email address was found out, they're like, yeah, that's him. That's the one who leaked the information. Second thing, this was during the time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and apparently Chelsea Manning was going into a secure environment, putting CDs into the secure computer, and pretending that that Chelsea was listening to Lady Gaga. No, you can't do that. That I don't care. Like, that's the story Chelsea tells him. Like, no secure environment will allow you to put media inside your computer from home. I don't know. Like, your regular workstation, yes. Your non-secure. Your secure. No, I know people who were like they couldn't do their job for several weeks to a month because they accidentally stuck a flash drive from their non-secure terminal into their secure terminal, and that not only was that machine kaput, that machine it was quarantined from the network, sent to the security people, never saw it again. I was a equipment custodian, so that was a machine that was on my account that I had to deal with years later trying to track down. I'm like, whatever happened to this machine? And apparently they just put it in storage, and they magnetized the whole thing, made it like it was basically a brick. So they degaused it, they stripped it, they made sure that there was no... Well, obviously before they did all that, they made sure that there was no actual breach, that no information from the secure environment leaked out. But there was this huge dilemma over that, and that was just something like a flash drive. And Chelsea's talking about putting DVDs or CDs or CD-ROMs into the disk drive and copying information off onto that and then sneaking them out. I'm like, who is monitoring this secure environment? Because none of that should have happened. You're not authorized to put your own media inside a secure computer. Not only that, you are only authorized to take information off of there for specific purposes to move to another secure terminal. But most of those secure terminals are already connected to each other, so there's no reason to take it off and put it onto physical media. You can just send that information to the other secure terminal. It's on a completely separate and closed network for that purpose, because they don't want you to make physical media of classified information, because that physical media is easier to access than a computer that you need a special permission. You need to log in with your military ID. You need your password in addition to that, and then you need permission to that data on the system. Physical CD, somebody gets a hold of that, all they have to do is put in their computer and they have access to your classified information. Much harder to secure. That's why we limit that as much as possible. So the Chelsea situation is a bit different. I forgot why I started going off into the details of that. But no, I still think that Chelsea was in the right. Here's the other factor that is different in the Chelsea case. So while Chelsea was exposing war crimes performed by the United States military, and I do specify war crimes, these were incidents of civilians being attacked by drone strikes, by military bombings, where we don't know if they got the terrorist or whoever they were supposedly targeting. All we see are civilian targets. We don't see the bad guy. Like there's a whole slew of these documents and videos and stuff, and you're like, you guys are just firing indiscriminately into these crowds. You don't know if that's the guy you're looking for. You're just like hoping. You're not allowed to do that. There are rules for engagement. There's all kinds of stuff. So what Chelsea Manning did was what you're supposed to do. Although that is something you can take to the IG and they should investigate. And if they don't, well, then you go through WikiLeaks or whatever. As far as I know, Chelsea just skipped straight to WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
But the other side of Chelsea's situation is a lot of the information that was released was also regarding ongoing missions where people were already deployed, where people were out there or were about to go out there to do things. That creates more of a problem because that puts lives in jeopardy. I know the intention is to save lives and to say, hey, our U.S. military is overstepping their bounds, they are overstepping their authority, and they're doing things that the public would not agree about or would not condone if they knew the facts. That on that side I agree with. But in order to do that, Chelsea released information that puts other American lives at risk. People who are actually out there, and I don't know if maybe they're doing the same thing. Maybe they were targeting civilians. I don't know the cases of all of those incidents because usually, I mean, when you're talking about top secret, these are top secret missions that aren't, you don't know the details of it. You don't know their target. You don't know where they are, at least for the most part. I mean, you can go into each individual case and investigate all these, but we don't know enough about each case, but we do know that these were ongoing missions. They were missions that were either approved or were actually in progress when this information was dumped. And it's like, what you've given because this is WikiLeaks, this is not just the United States. This is something anybody across the globe can access. And do you think ISIS is not monitoring that? You think Russia's not monitoring that? You think China's not monitoring that? No. They're trying to gain any kind of information they can about ongoing military actions. There's something, it was called Purple Dragon. This is in the military. This is something started back in Vietnam era. So the emblem is a purple dragon. It's called OPSEC. And what it is what they found during Vietnam is and I think this may have started as back as early as the Korean War, but it's around that era where they started to say, hey, our enemy knows what our mission plans are, but we found that it's not a breach in security. None of our mission details have gotten out to the public. None of it has been spied on. They don't have any access to that. But after investigating, what they found is that things that they were making publicly available, little small bits of information like, hey, here's the duty roster for all the people working this week. Here's the truck schedule on who's driving. Here's a truck schedule on which trucks are leaving the compound on which days. Here's the meal plans for the next. Oh, and by the way, next week there's a block in, or there's there's no meals planned for this week, and you're like, oh, I wonder what's going on there. It's because nobody's going to be at the base because they're off on a mission. So there was little details all put together where the enemy can say, okay, we know these guys are working. We know that these trucks are leaving the base. We know that the base is going to be almost unoccupied at this time because they haven't planned for meals. They've planned to have a reduction of force in that base on these days. Something's going down on this time frame, and they can piece all these together to kind of get a ballpark picture of, okay, we know a time frame, we know who. Okay, these guys, we know what their job is. These guys are engineers. These guys are, explosive experts. They can piece all that together with publicly available information, and we're able to figure out what our strategy was. So they started this program called OPSEC, what this did is it restricted that information. It was no longer publicly broadcast in areas, because usually it was publicly available for members of the military so they could easily access it, because okay, what's the meal plans for it? But after OPSEC, they started restricting that, so it made it to, you had to have, in order for you to have access to the information you needed to go to an authorized place. So it was no longer publicly available or displayed on the base where anybody walking through the base, because you're talking about, even at deployed locations, you still have third-party nationals working with you and working on the base. So, and this was true even when I was deployed to Djibouti. We still had Somalian civilians that would come on the base and clean stuff, janitorial positions, But due to OPSEC, there were specific things we had to do to make sure that these civilians could not see. Even you're like, oh, but what are they going to do with my lunch plan? No, you still have to, you have to cover that up, make sure they don't see anything that they could piece together to figure out something that we're in the middle of doing. So it was a limiting the amount of information they could get. But what Chelsea Manning did is kind of like blow the doors off of OPSEC, because it's like, well, these are ongoing missions, and you're giving them enough information where they can actually sabotage these things, jump, they could build ambushes for our guys, get them pinned down, and then we have to send rescue missions to help those guys, and then that just, yeah. So while I think what Chelsea Manning did was necessary, and it was pointing out how bad it was when you're talking about what the U.S. was involved in as far as our military actions, and how little regard there seemed to be for human life overall. Because they kept telling us, oh, we're limiting casualties, we're limiting civilian casualties, and all like that. The documents released by Chelsea Manning kind of prove the opposite. It's like, well, it's a 50-50.
So you agree with what she did? You just do. You disapprove of how she went about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's the how Chelsea went about it, but there's also, there was no regard for the collateral damage on their part. When they released the information, it's like,
yeah,
it was a little overboard in how much data was released. Because I could understand, hey, these are missions from the past. These are past evidence of the United States. Basically, these were. A lot of these are actually war crimes by any definition of it, because these were missions. So there are things you can do in the law of armed conflict. So if terrorists are inside of a hospital and they're shooting out from the hospital or they're doing their criminal stuff inside the hospital, that makes that hospital a valid target. So that is approved by the Geneva Conventions and all that sort of thing. So that would not technically be a war crime if you bomb a hospital that has terrorists in it they're running out of the hospital and trying to use the hospital as shelter. But there's incidents that were released in the Manning reports or the Manning data dumps where there's no evidence that the terrorists are using civilian targets as human shields. They are in a crowded market or at a wedding or something along those lines, some kind of public gathering where the U.S. decided to strike. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's one thing that they're hiding behind civilian targets for protection. It's like, it's another, like, this is a open public event that they just happen to be at. And that's when you decide, and you're like, oh, well, civilian casualties, oh, well, we got to get this bad guy. I'm like, there is no justification for that under the law of armed conflict. Because, like, even though they are a terrorist, that particular activity had nothing to do with their terrorist acts. Yes, they may have been using human shields to make sure, to try to prevent the U.S. from attacking them, but they weren't doing a terrorist thing at that organization. We have no proof of it. We have no proof that they are actively engaging in a manner that would warrant military action. That is a completely neutral setting. So it'd be equivalent to, like, okay, let's say Al Capone set up his shop inside of a church or whatever, and the government or the FBI can't raid the church and get to Al Capone. But then Al Capone goes to a baseball game, and then the FBI comes in with guns and starts shooting up the place in order to catch Al Capone at a baseball game. Like, what? That doesn't... he's not doing his criminal activity at the baseball game. You cannot do that. Yes, it makes it really difficult for the FBI and all those to do their jobs because they are hiding behind innocent targets, and they're manipulating the system. That I understand, but to fix that, you don't go overboard and go completely the opposite direction. It's like, well, that means any innocent civilian lives is at risk, and you're like, that doesn't follow through. We're supposed to be better than that. Anyway,
yeah.
So I agree completely with the ideals, the intent of Chelsea Manning. I think it was carried out pretty terribly, but I still think WikiLeaks is an incredible service to the United States overall. And so when you're talking about, was it Chris Kyle? Was the guy's name? That's the American. American Sniper is the film based on kind of his.
Yeah, I actually watched it and last year. At the time, I was like, yeah, it was a pretty good movie. The fact that they couldn't get a real baby, they had to animate the baby, which it was pretty clear they were using a doll. That was kind of one shitty part of the movie. But I think in general with whistleblowers, I generally approve of them, considering that, without them, who knows how bad things would get right now. If they weren't here. Imagine, instead of NSA spying and war crimes. It's common knowledge that some presidents have backed genocidal acts in various countries. Imagine how bad it could get even beyond that if there weren't whistleblowers and people saying this is what's going on, and the people that are defending who are up against these whistleblowers. It's like, imagine how bad our civil liberties would be eroded beyond what they've been eroded already. Imagine how bad it would get if there weren't whistleblowers who were, I would consider whistleblowers to be one of the most patriotic people in the United States.
And that comes down, so there's this old phrase, who watches the watchman? And that's what we got, that's what we got into this whole argument about, because BTK was criticizing Snowden because Snowden didn't try to change the system using the system as it was. Snowden went through outside sources. And I disagree with BTK on this, and I think this is a perfectly legitimate disagreement. I can understand BTK's perspective, and I can understand why people have that. I disagree because I think it's more important to break the law for a more moral, higher purpose. And that's what I think. That's why I think Snowden is ultimately a hero in this. Even though he did break protocol, he did release confidential information to the public. It was supposed to remain confidential. And I'll tie this into the Hillary Clinton case, because I've made a video condemning Hillary Clinton's use and breach of classifications and confidentiality. Although Clinton didn't do it for honorable purposes or for anything moral. She did it for her own
laziness.
Her own laziness and her own corruption, because she was using her position. At least from what we can tell, there's definitely, if not a if not a causation, there's definitely a pretty obvious correlation between her activity as a Secretary of State and the Clinton Foundation, and that they were using that private email server to facilitate those interactions. I mean, we can't prove definitively that's what's going on, but you're like, I don't know how you could get to any other conclusion based on the evidence that's there. So that's a breach of confidentiality, and you're like, oh, then I should be condemning Snowden based on those same terms. It's like, well, it seems like Hillary Clinton was doing that for her own personal benefit. Snowden got nothing out of this.
He had a lot to lose.
He had everything to lose, nothing to gain, but he did it for the right reasons, and that's the public needs to be aware of what is going on, because the public and Congress were being lied to by our intelligence agencies. So, and this is something BTK disagrees with me on this, but the facts are correct that BTK is talking about. So, the intelligence agencies, like mainly the NSA, is recording every phone conversation ever, and on this big database. And while no human eye looks at that data, it's all scanned by AI in order to find terrorists and things like that. I disagree that I'm stating the case that the mere collection of that data is a violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if no human eye sees it and it's just an AI that's scanning. You cannot collect that information to begin with without a probable cause and a warrant.
Yeah, and this is a point I've seen made repeatedly, and I think this needs to be iterated again. Is just because something is the law doesn't mean that the law itself is correct. I mean, people are just saying it's the law. Slavery was legal. It was legal to segregate the races. It was legal to do all these certain things. It's like that doesn't necessarily make the law.
So not only was slavery legal, everything Hitler did was legal. Everything King John, the story of Robin Hood and the Magna Carta, everything King John did was perfectly legal. And yet Robin Hood is the hero. The barons who held King John at sword point to get him to sign the Magna Carta, those guys are the heroes. Everything the British Empire did to the U.S. colonies was perfectly legal. And yet the founding fathers, the revolutionaries who fought back against the British Empire, those guys are the heroes. And I brought this up in the Twitter conversation with BTK. Harriet Tubman breaking the law. Everything Harriet Tubman did was illegal. It was illegal to run away as a slave. It was illegal to go to the North. It was illegal to help other slaves escape. And yet that's Harriet Tubman's legacy, and she's the hero. And rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard they might put her on a dollar bill, I'm like, you could not have chosen a more badass person to put on the dollar bill than Harriet Tubman. Yeah, not only got herself out, but risk life and limb to help other people get out. That's breaking the law for the right reasons. So Edward Snowden, I think, falls in that same category. It's like, yes, breaking the law to do the right thing. And I know this may sound like, to some people, like that's the ends justify the means, but that's not what I'm saying here. Because it is the moral position of doing the right thing. So the ends justify the means can be used to
to justify atrocities. You're like, well, the ultimate goal is like, well, if that ultimate goal doesn't fall within a structured morality, then the ends don't justify the means. But as long as the ends are founded in moral principles, then and only then does the end justify the means. And then it is okay to do something that is against the law or against whatever the society at the time, to do what is right.
Yeah.
So it has to be on that moral foundation. That's the issue I take with BTK, because BTK keeps trying to say, oh, leave morality out of this. I'm like, no, morality is the foundation. No action can be justified without a moral foundation.
Mm-hmm. And it's yeah. And the thing I've always noticed is, I think the only way you can truly prevent abuse of power and all this secrecy from government is if you shrink its size.
Yes.
When I hear people like Cult of Ham say we need to expand the size and power of the state, or at least that's what he heavily implies with his healthcare plans and whatnot, it's like, not really. I mean, I also think that quasi-term limits, the type of term limits he proposed, along with minarchism, I think would be a great way to prevent corruption and abuse of power, which the type of term limits he proposed is like, so let's set the bar of an approval rating at 30-40%. If you're consistently below that, you're ineligible to seek re-election, either for one term or for life, which I don't mind that idea. I'm pretty sure there'd probably be nuances to go over in that area.
I would say there's nuances because Winston Churchill was not popular until for the majority of his he was Prime Minister of the UK. Not very popular guy. FDR, hugely popular guy. Winston Churchill, one of the greatest people who's ever lived. Excellent leader. Helped the UK. FDR, probably one of the worst leaders ever. And completely screwed over this country in a large way, and yet he was popular. Yeah. They wanted to he's the reason they installed term limits on the president, because they wanted to get him in for a fourth term. And I'm like...
Yeah, they got him in for a fourth term. He just died during it.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't... Yeah. That was actually a fourth term. I thought he died during the third. But yeah, that's even... Yeah, that's like... Yeah, so he successfully got his fourth term, and I'm like... If you look at all of the policies he enacted, all of the New Deal policies, everything as far as welfare and Social Security that all came in under his administration, crippled the United States. And we've lost trillions of dollars in productivity because of those policies put into place. And the economists overall, except for a few of the Keynesians, and even some of them agree on this. So you've got the Chicago School, Austrians, and I don't know if it's all Keynesians, but at least a portion of Keynesian economists all agree that those policies prolonged the Great Depression and caused more suffering and pain. And yet he was popular. Also, Abraham Lincoln, incredibly unpopular during his presidency. He narrowly won the presidency, and he was unpopular throughout his entire presidency. But, and despite, to me, he's kind of a mixed bag. So for every good thing he does, he seems to do two awful things during his presidency. But at least we can look at him as like, okay, even though I think his actions ultimately led to a civil war that we probably could have avoided, at least he did the right thing with the Emancipation Proclamation. Even though he did it for probably the wrong reasons, it was still based on the moral principle that all men are created equal. That was the right thing to do. So that is an instance of the ends justifying the means, because even though the means were pretty terrible and cost a lot of lives, at least now we no longer have slavery, at least not in the United States. There's still human trafficking and stuff, but it's no longer the norm. It has become on the outside. It is not the main driving economy of the United States and all that.
Yeah.
So it would have been better if we had done the UK's model, if we had been able to successfully do it the way that they did. But at least at least it's the silver lining that, yes, okay, fine, slavery is abolished in the United States. That's a silver lining of a bad situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd also like to quickly point out, just because I've been reading up about various presidents, Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan. I think they were like preceding that. I think they kind of had some hand in causing the Civil War to begin with
Mm-hmm.
their. Well, it was mostly James Buchanan who, following
Yeah.
Franklin Pierce, who kind of allowed the idea of the Civil War to happen with his inability to prevent the states from succeeding and whatnot. And Abe Lincoln, who,
Well,
by the way,
mm-hmm.
who won under 39% of the national vote,
Yeah, it was pretty.
who
Yeah, it
it was
was.
a it was very close. Not
Yeah.
the closest, but it was pretty. It was rather close.
Yeah,
But
it is. Yeah, the nation was completely divided, and a lot of people did not approve of his presidency.
yeah, but I would point like just I don't think because you know James Buchanan, who I'd rank as the single worst president. It's like
Hmm.
you know I would argue he was more responsible for the cause of the Civil War because of his
Yeah.
inability to lead and his inability to keep the country united. I think Abe Lincoln did bring the country back together, but I think it was within the later few years of his presidency, and then we had fucking Andrew Johnson and ugh. But yeah,
Yeah.
I generally think that popularity and unpopularity, it depends on the reasons. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, actually, it also depends on who you're asking. Because according to
of course.
CNN and according to MSNBC, and according to a lot of mainstream media, Trump's approval ratings are really, really low. And you're like, well, if you look at Reuters, like he's in the high 50s. He's got higher ratings than Obama.
Yeah, Obama. I actually looked at his approval ratings when he left office. It was around 56 to 60%.
Yeah.
His approval rating was in the low 40s, high 50s. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was actually in the low 30s at one point.
Yes.
But as the election of 2016 was dragging on, his approval rating did spike a bit. Donald Trump, it is difficult to get one consistent answer. Like,
Yeah.
somewhat within the first year of his presidency, a lot of polls said 35% of the country approved, while the rest disapproved. Then you got polls saying his approval ratings were around 60%, 50, 60%,
Mm-hmm.
and others are arguing it's currently at 43%. He won 46% of the vote. So I think if he could get at least around 48%, I think depending on where it truly is, his reelection chances, I think, would be better off if he could get at least 48 to 50% of the vote of the approval rating. But yeah,
Well,
but
the other thing about that approval rating is the media already has a lot of power in this regard. Now yeah, they have a lot of influence because despite it all, there are still people who use mainstream media. They watch cable news networks as the primary source of their information.
yeah,
And cable media outlets are largely anti-Trump. I mean, it's constantly day and night. The only one who doesn't do this is Fox, but every other one, you can like their entire 24-hour news cycle is all anti-Trump, day in and day out, and very like. It's very. If you try to find an example of them saying, "Okay, Trump did the right thing here," try to find an example within the past year of any of those other ones saying Trump did anything right, that Trump is doing anything well. It's, yeah, you're more likely to find an incident of ISIS doing a good thing, like IRL, than you are of a mainstream media other than Fox saying Trump did something good. I
yeah.
I think you're more likely to see an ISIS member walking a little old lady across the street before setting off a suicide bomb. Uh,
I mean, it also depends on, of course, the person you ask and like what their reason is. Like a lot of people did not like Harry S. Truman, yet he
yes.
won re-election when everyone thought that with the Dixiecrats, the
Hmm.
progressives, splitting off into three, that Thomas Dewey would win. Yet Harry Truman beat him by a couple million votes. So it depends on the reason for it. If it's because of their performance, that's one thing. But if it's
Yeah.
because of like their personal life, I don't. I think that's kind of silly and that's kind of really stupid. Like the Democrats getting all offended about Donald Trump cheating on his wife, yet they didn't. They covered that up with Bill Clinton cheating on his wife Hillary.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the thing is, Bill Clinton did his act in office while a sitting president, and he did it inside the White House and then lied about it. So Trump's activities was prior to his candidacy. It wasn't even while he was running or while he was, elected. It was his personal life before politics even came into the question. Slightly different, I know. But whether that is true or not, that has no bearing on his acts inside the presidency. The other thing is, while Congress is trying to impeach him over all of that for whatever reason, the whole Stormy Daniels, and then apparently now they're looking for, now we've got Trump collusion with Russia, and I'm like, there's nothing there to pin him on, nothing that is impeachable. Like, unless it's, there's far more evidence on other candidates and all that sort of thing, as far as deals with other countries. But even if everything they're claiming about Trump is true, that's not enough to get him out of the White House. That's everything that they're claiming right now, not enough to get rid of him as president. He can be impeached, but there's not enough to get him out of the White House. He needs to do something in the presidency that violates, that is
high crimes and misdemeanors.
High crimes and misdemeanors. Yeah, so he needs to do something that is so egregious that he is unfit for presidency. And yet they keep throwing around that unfit term, and no, he's done nothing that is unfit of the presidency.
Yeah, I mean, because the first time we actually impeached a president, it was over this law that was later declared unconstitutional. It was just bullshit anyway. The Office of Tenure Act under Andrew Johnson. He escaped removal by one vote, and it's like, so he fired someone that he appointed who serves at his pleasure. Apparently that violates the law. How the fuck does that work? Bill Clinton escapes removal by 17 votes, which that'd be funny if Al Gore actually became president and then gets defeated. That'd be funny, but it's
he was successfully impeached by was it the Senate, but not the House of Representatives?
I think the House votes to.
Yeah, so even with the Clinton situation, that's not enough to get you kicked out of the office. I agree that they kind of voted the correct way. I'm even though he had sex in the Oval Office, he committed adultery, it doesn't look good on the United States, and then he lied about it under oath.
That's perjury.
Yeah. Let him finish out his term as president and get him on that after the fact, because he should be forced to do something. As far as I know, no punishment, nothing on that. Perjury, I mean, come on, some kind of jail sentence, some kind of probation period, anything, something. I think the only punishment he had is he was disbarred, but he was ever going to be a lawyer ever again.
Yeah, and it was only a 5-year disbarment, I think. I don't remember if it was permanent. But, they had charges of abuse of power, obstruction of justice. Those, I think, he was acquitted on. I think they did convict him of perjury. Yeah. And but they didn't have enough votes to vote him out. I can only imagine, because I think historians still rank him as a above average president. I wonder if the impeachment would have actually caused him to be ranked as a below average president. I
am not sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I touched on this a little bit more previously, but I need to lay the foundation. So the foundation for whether authority is legitimate or not. Now, in the past, this may not have been the case, but then again, our understanding of the world and of human behavior has grown drastically since then. And I think it peaked as far as this particular area during the Enlightenment period, when we've got Adam Smith and John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, all of these great minds looking into this, and George Mason and the Founding Fathers, when they penned the Declaration of Independence based on a lot of the philosophy being understood at the time, when they established, or when they acknowledged the existence of natural rights. So in the Declaration of Independence is worded, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the phrasing there. That exists beyond the government. And this is something I've had to argue with, like, unalienable. Do you guys... That doesn't come from the government. And this is the Declaration of Independence. This is not the U.S. Constitution. This is not the Bill of Rights. Yeah. This is we don't recognize legitimacy of the British government. That's what the Declaration of Independence was. It was, we don't recognize you as our legitimate rulers. Based on these things. And it was based on the existence of natural rights. And if you look throughout history, it becomes so obvious that this is how people have always reacted to abuse of authority. And abuse of authority is the exercise of illegitimate authority. Because it's a violation of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when it gets to that point, a society rebels against the illegitimate authority, and sometimes that rebellion is quashed, and, like Spartacus. But other times that rebellion succeeds, like in the United States with the Revolutionary War. So the French Revolution is another example of this. This was that the French people stopped recognizing the authority of the French government because they were violating their natural rights. They may not have stated it as such, but that's what was going on there. And if you look at the world, understanding, okay, humans have the natural right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Oh, okay, what the French government did is a violation of their liberty and their lives, and well as their pursuit of happiness. And when it gets to that point, the people rebel because they understand, hey, wait a minute, you don't get to tell me what to do with my life. I'm an independent person. I don't care if you're the king. I don't care if you were appointed. I don't care. It does not matter. My right to live and act as I see fit is more important than any kind of written document, than any religious figure anointing you, than any... This is human nature. It is so intrinsic to who humans are. You cannot get around it. You cannot avoid it. And so understanding that principle, you have to keep authority in check to make sure it doesn't violate the natural rights of people, because that's what leads to violent revolutions. And if you're looking at the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers, as well as all the documentation, I mean, there's various letters written by the Founding Fathers discussing all of these things that they were considering when writing the Constitution and when writing the Declaration of Independence. They're discussing these issues, and they're saying, if we establish a government, we need to make sure that it does not violate the people's rights, because we don't want the revolution that we had to
go through.
Yeah, we had to go through in order to get out of under the illegitimate rule of the British Empire. We don't want the citizens to have to go through the same thing, because it's not likely they will succeed again. And it's just going to lead to this cycle of, and this is not the exact words, but that's the ideas that are being expressed, is it's going to lead to this cycle of, government overstepping its bounds, people revolt, government oversteps bounds, people revolt. It's just the endless cycle of chaos and death and decay. And they're like, well, we need to make sure that we put checks and balances into our government to prevent it from exercising illegitimate authority over the people that would violate these this was eventually what became the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, is we need to make sure that our government doesn't ever become illegitimate. And what Snowden is pointing out is, this is, that the thing that the Founding Fathers were worried about, it's crept into our government despite their best efforts. We are seeing illegitimate exercise of authority, and this is the kind of stuff that people in the past, would do. I mean, like, if you look at what the Founding Fathers, during, like, the Boston Tea Party and the Tax Act and the Stamp Act, you're like, that's what they were willing to die over? Today we have the Tax Act and the Stamp Act and the Tea Act and all of... We have that 1,000 times over, and people don't they just kind of like, oh, yep, that's the norm. The amount of taxation that they were talking about there it was less than 5%, and yet we're now like, oh man, I can't believe my taxes are 30%. And you're like, people fought and died in a war over 5% taxes. Here, the now 30% or 25 to 30% is the norm that we're okay with and comfortable with. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And here we've got an incident where Snowden exposes a huge corruption in the government and in the NSA. Oh, so this is the last point I want to kind of end on. Or, well, maybe not the last point, but before you go, because you're going to leave for another stream.
Yeah.
But it was the NSA and our intelligence agencies and our government that made the laws that prevented Snowden from doing this through legal channels. The ones doing the bad things are the ones in charge of interpreting the law.
Mm-hmm.
That, and again, going back to that phrase, who watches the watchman, that's exactly what that phrase is alluding to. And, that's the Watchmen comics, if you ever, that's the phrase that they get the name of that particular group is from that old, it's an old adage or whatever. And it goes to the idea is, if the people who are in charge of enforcing the laws are corrupt, who is in charge of enforcing the rules upon them? It's supposed to be the people, because this is a republic. But how can the people enforce those rules if we don't know what they're doing? If they're being corrupt and breaking the law, but we don't know about it, how can we possibly do anything to stop it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very... yeah. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so I do have to go, so thanks for having me on your channel. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and as always, pineapple pizza. I don't get why the fuck you people like it until next time.
All right, so he's going to end on his end, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about this topic. So, and I'm ultimately disappointed in the American people because although there was the initial outcry about what the NSA was doing, nothing has changed. The NSA is still spying on us. The NSA is still... the CIA, this is, what is this? The Vault 9 stuff that was released, where they have known exploits in your devices. Your TVs, your smartphones, CIA has programs where they will... or ways of getting into your devices without your knowledge and activating your camera or activating the microphone so they can record your conversations when it looks like the device is not on. Same thing with smart TVs. They can... because a lot of smart TVs have built-in either cameras or sensors to, a lot of applications, also they're Wi-Fi enabled. CIA can come in, backdoor that, have your TV screen remain off, but activate these other devices inside where they're recording your conversations. They're watching your activity inside your house. This is not something that is... this is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is stuff that is confirmed. But these were exploits that the CIA knew about and were supposed to, by law, inform the manufacturers of these devices about. And they did not. And then the Vault 9 leaks happened, and this was WikiLeaks. But the thing, prior to the WikiLeaks release, this information was... it was... I don't remember if it was a hack of the CIA or if it was something along those lines, but this information got into criminal hands prior to the WikiLeaks document release. It was not WikiLeaks that released this to criminals. Criminals got this beforehand, which is why the Vault 9 stuff was released on WikiLeaks, so people would understand how bad this breach was. Because it exposed, hey, the CIA has had these tools and has had these exploits for a while, and now the criminals have it. Because the CIA didn't do their due diligence, they didn't do what they were responsible for, which they're supposed to report it to these manufacturers and get these exploits patched or fixed or have these software and hardware changes so that way that people couldn't do this, and yet the CIA said nothing. And then criminals found out about what the CIA knew, and then criminals started exploiting these things. This is, what was that called? This was a huge hack. I can't remember the name of the... So it was one of these Vault 9 exploits that criminals has had prior to the WikiLeaks release. Oh, I wish I could remember the name of it because it's drawn a blank at the moment. But what they did is they infected a lot of people's computers using this particular, I don't know if it was an exploit or if it was a program created by the CIA. I'm not quite 100% sure on what exactly it was. I do know it affected a lot of computers, and the criminal element that was using this held those people's computers at ransom, and in order to pay the ransom, people gave money to a Bitcoin wallet. And I gotta remember the name of this because this is bugging me. I gotta look this up. So I know it was ransomware. Whoops. This should be on the Wikipedia article because I know this was a huge one. It was something. Oh, WannaCry. That was like the highest profile. Yeah, so highest profile. That was one of the big ones that affected the community. And to the best of my knowledge, the people behind this have not been caught. And what stopped this from being more damaging than it was that there was a website or let me see if I got the details of this right. Oh, let me double check the chat. Yep, nobody in the chat. Yeah, hundreds of millions of dollars was ransomed by this. So WannaCry basically bricked your computer. If it got exposed to this, let's see. So it was a crypto worm. So this was software. And then it would, so it's $300 to $600 per person, and it was submitted to a Bitcoin wallet. So there was, and I want to make this guy's name clear because this guy is the good guy in the situation. So, Marcus Hutchins accidentally discovered the kill switch domain hard-coded in the malware. So he registered the domain name for a DSN sinkhole, stopping the attack or the spread of the worm. This guy is a hero, and nobody says much about this dude. I mean, this is something. I mean, it's on Wikipedia, but Marcus Hutchins, his name is not well known. His name is not a household name, and this guy saved so many people from, because the WannaCry virus, and this was a very large exploit in people's computers. And it would turn your computer basically to become useless. All of your photos, all of your data, and entire businesses could be crippled by this. And that's why they were ransoming it. I mean, they were saying, hey, if you want all your stuff back, $300, $600. But because of his actions here, where he found this, the domain hard-coded into the malware, registered that domain, and prevented it from spreading this worm further. Because he took control of that domain from the people who were spreading this worm. He stopped it from spreading. It's basically this is the internet equivalent to curing polio, right? When vaccines were, this is like a vaccine for the WannaCry virus. This is on that same level. Whereas what's his name, Louis Pasteur. We know that name. That's taught in all the high schools, and that's one of those, this. What this guy did is on par with that. Because had this not occurred, had he not stopped this, this would have proceeded to infect every computer, not just in the United States, but possibly globally. This is, I mean, maybe not every computer, because I don't know how exactly this exploit worked, but I do know it was very, very, a lot of PCs were susceptible to this particular crypto worm. And it was only by stopping it at the domain level that these attacks were prevented. So, yeah, so I'm reading the details of this. So what this particular worm did is it would encrypt your computer files, and so you had to pay for a decryption key in order to unencrypt all your files. So And so this particular software, yes, so it had to go to that domain to get the encrypt. So for this particular bit of ransomware, it does no good to encrypt a person's computer and then ask them to pay you money if you can't prove that you have the decryption tool that will allow them to access their files. So if you cannot give them the key to the lock you just placed on their stuff, they're not going to give you any money. So you go in and you lock them out of their. So let's make this for those people who aren't tech savvy and all that sort of thing. So basically, this is like a thief coming to your house, changing while you're away, taking the locks off the doors, changing them with their own locks that have their key. And then saying, hey, if you want the key to your house, because right now you're locked out of your house, you can't do anything with your house, all your valuables are in there. If you want this key that unlocks your locks, you have to give me $300. That's essentially what's going on here. Now, in order to prove that their money is not just being wasted, you have to prove that that key does indeed unlock their front door. Otherwise, they're paying you $300 for a key, and you give them a key that doesn't work on their front lock, well, they're still locked out of their house. So 2 or 3 incidents of this happen, and the people are like, nope, stop paying the ransom. You don't get what you want. You don't get your stuff back. You don't get your private details back. You don't get your computer unencrypted. So don't pay them any money. The entire purpose of this WannaCry software was to make money. It was not malicious just to be malicious. It was, hey, we can stand to make hundreds of millions of dollars here. So if you were in what this Marcus Hutchins did, is he cut out their way of proving that they had the key that would unencrypt the encrypted software, because it's not a universal key that unlocks everybody's computer. Every individual computer that is encrypted has its own unique key. So my key, just like my key to my front door is not going to open the key to your front door, same thing in here is one key for one lock. And that's what they needed, this domain that was hard-coded into the software. They needed this particular domain in order to prove that they had the key to go with your lock. And if the software could not connect to that domain, it would not proceed to encrypt because there would be no way to decrypt. And then they'd have no way to get money. Alright, So while what he did didn't help anybody who had who already had the WannaCry infection and all that sort of thing, it either eliminated or at least slowed the spread of this particular WannaCry virus, because the people behind it, he basically cut off their way of funding or of proving that paying them was actually worth anything. So they stopped making money. Their Bitcoin wallet stopped getting transfers and all that sort of thing. So even though WannaCry eventually had a second version that didn't have that particular flaw in it, when that second version came out, we at least knew what we were looking for. We at least had, like, oh, yeah, you caught us with our pants down the first time. Not going to happen again. Now people are actively looking for these types of software, and people are actually trying to crack down on security and make sure that they aren't susceptible to the same infection, the same attack. So but at the time where this occurred, it was happening so rapidly we could not react to it quickly enough. So what this man did was huge. I forget why I started talking about this. Because this is all traces back to the CIA. And this is not the stuff that is being reported on mainstream media and on cable and all these sorts of things. And you're like, this is the kind of stuff that we should be holding our intelligence agencies accountable for. And yet, nothing. No one has gone to jail over the CIA's incredible negligence in this area. Because as far as we know, this particular type of ransomware is something they either knew about prior to its attack, or maybe even designed themselves in order to exploit foreign governments and stuff like that. Whereas the criminals who use this to make money, but the CIA would have used this to blackmail foreign dignitaries and all of that sort of thing. Or maybe even entire governments. But since they were using this particular tool for their own benefit, once it was released to the criminal element, they had an obligation to say, hey, whoa, U.S. people, this is what's going on, this is bad. No, CIA said nothing until it was already a problem, until this was already out there infecting people's computers, until this was already out there costing people hundreds of dollars, several hundred millions over the course of this was a very short time frame. I'm thinking less than a month. I'm trying to figure out the okay, yeah, this was a week's time. More than 230,000 computers in over 150 50 countries. So this is a week's time. So this is Friday, May 12th of May 2017 to the 19th of May 2017. That's when 230,000 computers, 150 countries, hundreds of millions of dollars. Let's see if I can get an exact figure of how many. Yeah, again, these are estimates as far as how many countries, how many computers, because it's not really. Yeah. So so the Wikipedia article says that the security experts traced this worm to North Korea. That seems a little far-fetched because this was around the time when those Vault 7 leaks were occurring. So this is not. While it is possible that that Korea was involved, it's a lot of these cyber attacks and all that sort of thing. There's huge ties between this and the CIA, and their known exploits and their software that they've been using and all that sort of thing. So it is very dubious to think, oh no, this is just something that was unavoidable. It's because there's too many examples of these sorts of things, of our government knowing about something, letting it happen, either by incompetence or by corruption. There's too many examples of this happening throughout history, throughout the United States history, and this is an abuse of authority because it's violating the moral principles that the people are in charge, not the CIA, not the FBI, not the president, not the Constitution. The people of the government are in charge because each of us has natural rights that are unalienable. So here's the thing, I gotta unalienable. We're going into this. So I'm gonna use the exact definition. So this is from dictionary.com. Not transferable to another or not capable of being taken away or denied. Did it mention anything about government in there? U.S. Constitution, presidency? No. So this is Merriam-Webster's dictionary. So unalienable and inalienable are synonyms for one another. So I've got it. So they've got the inalienable definition. Incapable of being alienated, surrendered, or transferred. And I guess maybe I need to look up alienable, because that alienated. Okay, so alienated is another way of saying transferable to another's ownership. Alienated, feeling withdrawn or separated from others or from society. No, I don't think that's quite this exact definition. Huh. Oh, okay, maybe that's, so, separated from is another, so yeah. That's another way of describing this particular aspect of natural rights. You cannot be separated from your natural rights. They are intrinsic in you. They are inherent in who you are as a human being. Let's see. Bring up another. Let's see. Oh, come on. Where's the Oxford? Okay, unalienable. This is English Oxford. What? You don't have a definition for that. Another term for inalienable. Let's go there. Okay, so not subject to be taken away from or given away by the possessor. You cannot give your right to life to another person. You cannot have your right to life taken away from you. Now, this particular definition says cannot be given away by the possessor, but that's not true because there is nothing about natural rights that says you cannot commit suicide. Now, it's not advisable, that is not a correct course of action, but that is your right to choose based on your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you think that your life is miserable and it's never going to get better, no one is allowed to force you to stay alive, because that would be a violation of your right to life. That would be a violation of your right to liberty. If you are so sure that that is the correct course of action for yourself. Oh, and I think the whole time that I've been streaming this, it has had the Google Hangout link broadcasting, hasn't it? Yep, right there. So yeah, anybody can come in and join me if you've got something to say on this particular topic. But yes, that's all. The natural rights has to be the foundation for morality. And while I do believe in the axiom of the non-aggression principle, that is founded on the idea of natural rights. Without the idea of natural rights, the axiom of non-aggression principle doesn't make as much sense. So the idea behind the non-aggression principle is based on the right to life and the right of personal property. If those don't exist, then it doesn't. You can't aggress against someone else. So what aggressing in the non-aggression principle is referring to is violating someone's rights. So the only exception that the non-aggression principle allows for is you are allowed to violate someone's rights in order to protect another person's rights. So in this case of self-defense, right? If somebody is coming at you with a knife, you can take their life according to the principles of the non-aggression. Even though that is a violation of their right to life, they are attempting to violate your right to life as well as possibly others. In that case, you are allowed to defend yourself or defend others. So if somebody is attacking someone, like if you see someone trying to stab somebody across the street and you have a handgun, you can take that handgun out and shoot the assailant. Nothing in the non-aggression principle prevents you from doing that. You are saving a life. But that is based on the notion that life is important to begin with, that human life is valuable, and that it is to be protected and preserved at all cost. Now, if somebody is attacking, so if you see somebody across the street with a wiffle ball bat hitting somebody, you do not have the right to shoot the wiffle ball bat carrier. Wiffle ball bat is not going to kill somebody. Wiffle ball bat is not going to do any damage. I don't know if you've seen a wiffle ball bat. Yeah, sure, it might hurt a little bit. Nobody's life is being threatened by a wiffle ball bat. It is designed specifically not to injure people. It's designed for little kids, so that way they don't hurt themselves. This is not an aluminum baseball bat. It's not a hardwood bat. This is it is designed to be safer, to not cause permanent damage. You cannot retaliate against someone with a wiffle ball bat. Like, oh, I feared for my life, and you shot them? No, that would be... Because the idea behind the non-aggression principle is the idea that life is valuable. Human life is valuable. and you're trying to maximize the existence of human life as much as possible. So this is why self-defense is allowed and is legitimate, because one person who ignores the right to life of other people and goes around on a murdering spree, or even just killing one other person, so let's say there's a population of 100 people. So this is, so 100 people, and one of those 100 people does not hold dear the sanctity of the right to life. They completely ignore the right to life, and they attack and kill one person. You now have 99 people. And then that crazy person goes around and kills another person. Well, now you have 98. There's no guarantee that you have that this crazy person who does not respect the right to life will stop. And eventually it could go from, 100 people down to 1 if left unchecked. I don't know if that's not necessarily the case. Okay. But it is a potential that this person will not stop because no one is stopping him. So, or them, I should say, because it could be man or woman, but whatever. In this particular scenario, it's a dude. Deal with it. Anyway. So, scenario number 2. You have 100 people. One guy doesn't respect the right to life. He attacks and tries to kill the 99th, one of those 99 remaining people, and instead is killed in the process. Well, your population size is still 99 people. That was unavoidable. There is no way to maintain 100% people in this particular scenario, because this guy is going to keep trying to kill people unless he is physically stopped by killing him. In this particular scenario. That may not always be the case, but when it comes to the imminent threat, like this person is lunging at you with a knife, that is not the time to say, well, I could have stopped him by, trying to calm him down or shooting him with a tranquilizer dart. If, at that point, it's more likely that he's going to succeed in killing someone. So when you're in the heat of the moment of the attack itself, that person needs to be stopped with, minimal force is required, yes, if you can. But if you don't have that option, or if you're not sure you have that option, you are perfectly allowed to shoot them to stop them. Now, granted, if this one crazy person is passed out because they drunk themselves into a stupor, or they trip and fall and knock themselves out, you cannot then open fire upon the subdued person. The reason you are allowed to open fire when the person is engaged in the process of attacking you is to prevent the further loss of human life. Because if you are able to kill that attacker, yes, you killed somebody, your population is now 99, that's where it stays. You're not gonna lose a 98th person, or it's not gonna go down to 98. You're not gonna go down to 97, or at least not due to murder and all that sort of thing. This is specifically dealing with murder, I should specify. But you're not going to continue to lose people in the population due to murder. It's going to stop at 99. No, none of the other 99 are going to die due to murder. That's a win. That's the best possible scenario, at least given the circumstances of this person being actively engaged in attack. Now, would it be preferable if you could hit him with mace or with a stun gun and drop him and make it so that way he can't physically attack you, and then lock him up so that way he can't kill anybody else, and then, that would be preferable, yes. That's not always, it's not practical to expect that in every situation. So this is why the use of force to lethality is admissible when somebody is about to be raped or when somebody is about to be killed. Because you are trying to maximize human life and limit the violation of our natural rights to as much as is reasonably as reasonable to expect. That's the idea behind the non-aggression principle here. We're trying to limit the violation of human rights to as much as is reasonably expectable. So you have to start off with the idea of natural rights, and then you build off onto this other idea of, okay, because we have natural rights, it is preferable that we limit to the greatest extent possible, or reasonably expectable the violation of our natural rights. Then you take those two principles, like so natural rights existing, the axiom of the non-aggression principle, you merge them together. Then you compare that to our laws. Okay, is a law that currently exists on the books, is it violating natural rights or the non-aggression principle? If it's doing either of those things, then it's not a legitimate law. Now, when it comes to the Snowden case on this particular example, you're like, oh, but nobody's life is threatened, nobody's security is... Well, I would very much argue in the case that somebody's security or liberty, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, there's other natural rights, but your right to privacy is an expected natural right, even though that's not exactly outlined in the Declaration of Independence. But your right to privacy, things that you do in private or in private conversation in the privacy of your own home, are not public knowledge. They are not exposed to the public. If you tell your significant other, your spouse, something, you expect that information to remain between you and your spouse and not to be broadcast to the entire world. So if your spouse goes and broadcasts to the entire world, that is a violation of your trust and your privacy. You have that inherent right to privacy as part of your being. Otherwise, if that wasn't understood, you wouldn't tell anybody anything. And this cuts off, this socially isolates somebody. This is the whole reason for the existence of rights and why these is when dealing with human interaction. Because if you think about the implication, if any time you go out into public and interact with other people, if you can't expect your safety, if you can't expect to remain alive, if you're in a group of 100 people, you're like, well, I go and interact with this group of 100 people. Last time, Billy got stabbed. Well, then you stop hanging out with those 100 people, and you isolate yourself from society. Same thing, if liberty, you're like, well, last time we got together, Billy got locked up and he's now in jail for the rest of his life. Well, then I'm going to stop hanging out with people and I'm going to isolate myself and become a hermit. That's what happens. There's a lot of... Without these natural rights, these are inherent because people will fight for the death to defend these things. People will give up their right to life in order to help other people experience that right to life. This is right. I'm trying to remember the exact quote from Patrick Henry. Sorry. Oh, yeah, so sorry. This is the derp. I don't know why. I knew the name Patrick Henry. I was like, oh, what was that phrase? Is it, yeah. Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, God Almighty. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. And that speaks to how foundational these are to the Founding Fathers and the people who fought in the Revolutionary War and who protested the British government. This was, and they are 100% correct on this. And this is, you can look throughout history and you can see this same trend. And it may not be expressed exactly, but this is what humans do. This is so inherent and so built into who we are that, yes, we would rather die than be slaves. We would rather die. We would give up our right to life in order to secure our freedom, not only just for ourselves, because there's no guarantee that you will get that freedom, but it's the potential for that freedom is so great that you would rather die than live as a slave. And the Founding Fathers and the people who were involved in the Revolutionary War, many of them, not the Founding Fathers themselves, but as far as I know, none of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence actually died during the Revolutionary War, but they definitely risked their lives. George Washington was a general fighting in those armies. Whole bunch of people did die during the Revolutionary War to secure freedom for those people who hadn't been born yet, and also the people who survived the war, for their right to freedom. This is pivotal. But without these things being guaranteed, you will have a fracturing of society. You will have people going off by themselves and living by themselves and not interacting with each other, because there's no guarantee that that other person won't imprison them or won't kill them or won't take away their other rights. So in order for us to have any kind of human interaction, any type of society at all, these rights have to be protected. These rights have to be, everybody involved in these interactions has to acknowledge that these rights exist and have to agree that they will not violate the rights of other people that they are interacting with. And these are not hard things to do. It's not like these are not hard principles. Like, how difficult is it to not murder someone? How difficult is it not to put somebody in a cage? How difficult is it not to undermine someone's personal autonomy? And that's the thing that I need to clarify about natural rights. All of the natural rights are negative in that, in order to preserve them, all you need to do is nothing. There's nothing you have to do to preserve someone else's right to life. You are simply required not to take their life. There's nothing you have to do to preserve someone's right to liberty. All you have to do is not enslave them. There's nothing you have to do to preserve someone's right to personal property. All you have to do is not take their stuff. There's nothing you have to do to ensure someone's right to pursue their own happiness. All you have to do is not make it so they can't live out their goals and dreams. Get out of their way. That's all you, hey, just don't stand in their way. Don't block them. Don't prohibit them from doing what they want to do. How hard is that? And the pursuit of happiness is one of those areas where it's a little harder to understand, because some people's pursuit of happiness may be at your expense. In that case, your other rights prevent that. So if somebody's pursuit of happiness is rape, they don't get to participate in that. That is something you can, by the non-aggression principle and your other rights. So someone cannot pursue happiness by violating rights. You are allowed to pursue happiness so long as that pursuit of happiness does not violate someone else's rights. And this is something that for some reason is not taught in school. Well, this should be like the first thing you are taught, and this should be taught throughout elementary school, high school, and university. And these things are for some reason obscured. They are not. These things are pivotal to life as we know it, and yet they are so overlooked and so ignored. It's tragedy, really. So it looks like nobody else is going to join me. And so this is something that I didn't. All of these ideas when it comes to natural rights and positive versus negative rights, because I don't think there are actual positive rights. Because a positive right would be something that requires you to do something to fulfill it. So if somebody had so a positive right is what people talk about when they talk about, healthcare is a right. Well, okay, so let's say healthcare is a right. What happens? Well, then somebody has to provide that. If somebody has to provide that, that means somebody is obligated to work to provide that. Now, these are what's considered, I think this is, I want to say Bastiat, who talks about positive versus negative rights. That's a name that keeps coming to mind. I don't know if that's exactly the philosopher who's talking about this particular element. But that can't be enforced universally, because so not only is that a violation because now somebody has to work to provide this, well, that's a violation of their right to liberty, so it conflicts with their other rights. But it also means that there's no way we can guarantee this for every person alive. A negative right, which is what we consider most natural rights, or this is not what we consider, this is what natural rights actually are, is they're all negative rights, and that nothing is required of anybody to fulfill them. Just don't violate them. You don't have to do anything to enforce them or ensure them. You just don't violate them. That's your only obligation or responsibility, is to not violate the rights of others. That's your responsibility to society. Do not violate other people's rights. Now, if healthcare was a right, you would have the responsibility not just to not violate somebody else's rights, you'd have the responsibility to work to grant people that right. And this is why this is not a legitimate right, and which is why it's called a positive right, because it requires effort on your part. So let's say your pursuit of happiness is you want to be a musician, you want to be a guitarist, you want to make music, make people happy. But the society says, nope, healthcare is a right. So even though you want to pursue your dream of becoming a guitarist or a professional musician, we need you in the hospital providing healthcare. You don't get to pursue what you want. Well, you are now a slave to the system, providing healthcare to the people rather than doing what you actually want to do with your life. The other thing about this particular dilemma is, what if your actions on what you actually want to do would be more beneficial in the long run to people? Well, unfortunately, you can't even pursue that. So playing guitar, yeah, that's not gonna. You're not gonna achieve sainthood with the Catholic Church for being an incredible musician. Well, not that sainthood with the Catholic Church matters, because they've sainted people who didn't really do much anything. Also, the Catholic Church is full of corruption, and well, topic for a different debate. Anyway, they're a different subject. I just want to say there's nobody holding parades for, this guy was such an awesome guitarist, let's make a holiday dedicated to them. And, you know, you're not going to achieve the status of Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Jesus by being a musician. It's just not going to happen. Let's say your pursuit of happiness is going to third world countries and providing them with clean drinking sources of water. Because that is one of my goals. I don't know if that's going to be feasible. I haven't gotten into a topic on graphene, or maybe I've gotten into that on the streams. I'm not quite sure. But graphene it's basically just pure carbon, and it is the ultimate water purifier. So if you can find some way to mass produce carbon in order to create a water filtration system, you can create a cheap and easy and the best way possible to filter water. So right now we've got distillation, which is all right. It's a good way to purify water. We have purification tablets, which is a chemical that you deposit in a water source that kills off all the bad bacteria and all that sort of stuff. That's slightly better than regular distillation, but it still has the downside of not only the chemical impurities that you're going to be intaking into your system, because you've basically chlorinated the water, and so now you're drinking chlorine and water, which is not good for you ultimately. But there's also the heavy metals and the sediment that are in that water supply are not removed. So what those pills do is ensure that the water is not going to kill you by having harmful bacteria, and so you're going to avoid dysentery and things like that. But you're still taking in toxic heavy metals that, if you're drinking them constantly, are going to pollute your system and could possibly cause you to die. If you're talking about, there's things like lead poisoning and various metal poisonings, as well as the corrosive effect of chlorine in your water. If you're drinking chlorinated water heavily, that is going to destroy your insides. Okay, the third most effective way to filter water is charcoal filters, right? So those are your Brita water filters, pure water filters, and stuff like that. Pretty good. You can get slightly better versions and stuff like that, but it's still the same basic principle of charcoal filtration. The next line, way of filtering, is reverse osmosis. And that's a pretty good way of getting rid of impurities. That gets rid of a lot of things, although it's those particular filters. So reverse osmosis is, so there's this really thin membrane of fibrous material, and basically the water is forced through this material. Man, what's going on with Anyway, sorry, my phone is blowing up at the moment. I don't know if you can hear the rush playing in the background. So charcoal filter is just water rolling through, flowing through charcoal, and that charcoal will filter out some of the impurities in it. It doesn't get rid of fluoride. It doesn't get rid of chlorine. It doesn't. Come on, what the heck? Yeah, so it doesn't get rid of a lot of impurities. Reverse osmosis does get rid of a lot more of those impurities because the fibrous material that is often used, and it's water put under great pressure. So the charcoal filter, the water just flows through naturally. It's just using regular gravity. You can't get regular gravity to force water through a reverse osmosis filter. You have to have that water under high pressure, and it basically forces the water through, so that way water is coming out of the other end, and then that filter's catching all the impurities and getting keeping them from the other side. And it's because it's under that high pressure and it's really difficult to get through, that at the other side what you get is mostly pure water. That's pretty good process. I gotta look this up. So vapor distilled water, similar to the regular distillation process, but this has a better result. So it is basically boiling water and catching the residue and all that sort of thing. But most processes of distillation does still not give you pure water. It gives you mostly pure water. Vapor distillation gets you a better result. If you compare reverse osmosis to vapor distillation is cheaper and gets you. The two are kind of neck and neck as far as their effectiveness. But vapor distillation has a better track record of keeping the water supply pure for longer, whereas with reverse osmosis, the longer you have that filter and eventually it starts to clog up and all that sort of thing, either you're going to get a trickle of water from the other side, or you're actually going to start to get the process or get to the point where impurities are passing through the filter because there's so much the pressure, because you're talking about your pipes and stuff in the house. The pressure is going to increase and force the water through the filter, and as impurities build up in the filter, well, that blocks off the holes, and so now you've got more water going through more holes, and basically what that does is that rips these holes open bigger than they're supposed to be, and then that allows impurities to pass through, which is why you need to regularly change your filter. Vapor distillation doesn't have that problem, although vapor distillation is cheaper for commercial purposes. It's going to be way too expensive for you to install in your house. I don't think they actually have personalized vapor distillations. I think they've got community and neighborhood ones, but that's that I think you'd have to live on a commune to get that sort of thing. Anyway, but vapor distillation, again, you've got the price and the fact that you can't make it personal. What graphene is a pure carbon atomic layer, single atom thick substance, and it forms this hex chain similar to a chain link fence, right? So if you've got this huge chain link fence, but what the unique property of graphene and carbon is the molecular bond creates an opening in graphene that is just big enough for H2O to fit through, and pretty much nothing else. Because most other metals will either have some kind of attraction to the carbon atom itself, because carbon atom is highly attractive force. So what's going to happen is, if you've got a single atom layer of graphene, and you're using that as your water filter, and water is flowing over a slanted graphene filter, that water will flow over this grid, and pure H2O comes out the bottom of this slant, and it will push impurities down the side of it. So this is theoretical completely, but this is not proven yet. So if you've got water flowing over this, yes, you're going to lose a little bit of the water on the kind of the outflow, but you're going to have water trickling through this, and it's going to be pure H2O, because the rest of the molecules, as far as the elements, so I guess maybe not elements, because element would be hydrogen and oxygen, but most commonly occurring molecules that you will find in water are not going to fit through the holes that are in the carbon filter. Any elements not elements, any molecules that possibly could squeeze through there, instead of squeezing through, will be attracted to the carbon and will stick to that filter. And eventually, because of the flow of water and the pressure, those molecules will be pushed down and further. And so so you can basically have a very small area for a particular filter that would be graphene based, and you can filter and get pure water at the other end. And this is, as far as we can tell, as far as I've done in my research, it's the most long-term way of filtering water. It's the least costly way of filtering water, provided you can produce graphene on a regular basis. Also, the graphene filter, all you would need is one atom layer thick of graphene to create an effective filter. But you could also make multiple layers, so that way water would have to filter through, so that way, just in case an impurity gets through one layer, it's not going to pass through 15 different layers. That impurity is never going to get to the bottom. So, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's essentially necessary, but if you could have 15 individual sheets of graphene, there's no way that you're going to get anything but pure water at the end. So there is the other instance. So as long as you've got pure water and then a glass container, you could have basically a water bottle like the size of a regular, like the Daily Wire tumbler, something about that size, that has 15 layers of graphene filters. All you would have to do is pour water in the top, let it gravity feed through the bottom. The bottom, you've got pure H2O and nothing else. You don't have any kind of contaminants. You don't have chlorine. You don't have salt. You don't have microbes. You don't have. You're not going to have charcoal in there, because that's another thing that you can actually have with a water filter, like a Brita and all of those regular charcoal filters that most people use. Is you can actually get charcoal and stuff into your water, and you're drinking that, and that's not good for you either. But if you have this graphene filter, then all you get is pure water at the bottom. So it's one of my goals is to figure out a way to mass produce graphene to the point where I can make water filters, make these water bottles, and then go to countries where clean water is not something that is readily available. Like, dysentery is still a huge thing in Africa. Also, we spend millions upon water filtration systems in the U.S. itself. So, I don't know if you know about this, but the actual water filtration or water purification system in your local city usually follows this particular trend. So, water flows into the reservoir or whatever, and usually there's a series of grids. The first one starts off kind of like a chain link fence. Water passes through this, catches all the big debris that's not that you don't want in there. So, all these huge particles, boards, anything. And then these filters get smaller and smaller over time. Not the filters themselves, but the holes in the filter. So you've got these big objects, slightly smaller objects, slightly smaller object, slightly smaller object, until you get towards the end, and then it's kind of towards the end, and then it's mostly liquid. So at the last filter, the last thing that's going to come through is liquid. And then you have this liquid, but it's not potable water. It's not something you can drink out of the tap. It's not something you'd want to bathe in. Usually it's still pretty mucky and disgusting at this point. So they do chemical treatments to get rid of, any bacteria and all that sort of thing. But there's still deposits. There's still, contamination in that water. And then on top of that, they introduce bacteria. They introduce bacteria into your water supply. What this bacteria does is it goes around and eats particles or these contamination or other dead organisms and stuff like it. So it goes through and basically kills all the bad stuff that is harmful that could, that would make the water not potable. And that bacteria all sinks to the bottom, and then that has to be scraped out and moved out of the way, and then you're left with your drinking supply of water, which they then add chlorine to, and then they add fluoride to, and they add other stuff, and then it gets sent out through the pipes to your huge process. Now, all of that could be solved with, you'd still have the filters, to block out all the larger objects, but the rest of that process, if we were able to mass produce graphene, you'd build this graphene filter once, and then as long as whatever's coming through is liquid, just liquid pushed up to the side, and then what comes out of the other side is clean drinking water. They would have to add magnesium and potassium. So here's the one problem with the graphene filter. It's not a problem per se, but this is water. H2O itself is highly not corrosive's not the right word. Highly soluble, I think is the correct term. So water absorbs other things very readily. This is why it's very difficult to get pure drinking water. Water absorbs other things. So you'll know, you got water, you dump salt in it, that water absorbs pretty rapidly into it and that sort of stuff. So what water has this tendency to actually leach nutrients out of your body. If you're drinking pure distilled water, that will flow through your system, and odds are by the time that passes out of you when you use the bathroom, it's going to take nutrients out of you and deposit that in your toilet, which is not really what you want. So this is why you'd have to add something back into it, which is usually if you're looking at bottled water, they add potassium and magnesium into the water after the filtration process. So that way the water doesn't leach you of nutrients and actually adds nutrients to you, which those are electrolytes. So when you're drinking bottled water, it actually puts nutrients back into you as opposed to leaching them out of you. Because otherwise, if you're drinking bottle after bottle of distilled water, you're going to have to eat a lot of vitamins and stuff to keep your to keep it all where it needs to be. So that's. But if we had a filtration system that was similar to that, yeah. Sorry, I got on a huge tangent talking about graphene and water filtration, but I think
you get there.
I am going to tie this around eventually. So anyway, you could have this single graphene filter, pure water on the other side, add potassium and magnesium, then pump that through the pipes to get to the people's houses. Huge cost reduction overall. Anyway. Oh, because I started talking about the right to Medicare, yeah. To medical treatment, not Medicare. Right to health care, I should say. So that is my goal, and I don't have the funding and all that sort of thing right now, and but eventually I'm going to start doing research. So once Funfair hits big, and once my Fair Market on Amazon hits big, and I'm making money and all that sort of thing, and I've got disposable income to invest in these sorts of things, I'm going to invest in graphene for the purposes of water filtration, so that way we can get rid of all these outmoded filtration processes, make it a lot cheaper and easier to maintain. Also, providing these water filtrations to the majority of Africa that still has problems with water filter. Now, that's what I want to do. Now, imagine a society where healthcare is a requirement, and it gets to the point, and so even though I don't have a background in healthcare, if healthcare is a requirement and we've got a bunch of sick people, and I'm not doing something related to healthcare, do you think they're going to let me invest in the possibility of finding a way to mass-produce graphene? Or they're going to say, no, we need you right now, changing bedpans and doing catheters and putting IVs in and stuff like that. And they're like, nope, healthcare's a right. You have to be here providing this for these people that need it. So even though you want to do something that could ultimately be more beneficial in the long run, there's no guarantee that's going to be beneficial, because there's no guarantee that you are going to be the one to discover a way of mass producing it effectively. So since there's no guarantee of that, here, clean this bedpan. You are required to provide this healthcare. That is a huge problem. And so that's why healthcare cannot be a positive right. Sorry, yeah, I got into the whole negative versus positive rights and started talking about healthcare as how that is how the potential of that, should it be a right, creates so many other problems. And one of these problems is people who would otherwise do things that might be more beneficial in the long run wouldn't be able to do them because they'd be forced to provide healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So, huge long tangent about graphene to get to that point. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I just re-entered the Hangout, after that one Hangout, and I'm like, what the hell are you? What are you talking about? How does that tie into what you're talking about? Like, yeah. What?
Because it's the idea that pursuit of something that we don't know about yet might lead to more beneficial things in the long run. But if we are required to do X, even if X is good, it may not be as good as the other thing I could do, which is why the liberty and the pursuit of happiness are so essential. There is so much human progress and innovation that was stifled by slavery because there are a lot of great minds who are forced to work on slave plantations that they could have, who knows what we could have had they otherwise been employed, had they been able to pursue what they wanted to do. And this is you can, after the abolition of slavery, you saw this huge increase, like not only in innovations with amongst white people, but amongst the black community as well. There are a lot of famous black inventors, like probably the most famous one, because this guy who's George Washington Carver, right, the peanut guy. Like, that's the one everybody goes to, but the guy who invented the stoplight, black guy. Like, had he been forced to work on a plantation his entire life, would we have the stoplight as we know it? Would we? Yeah. I don't know. Possibly somebody else could have come along and invented it, but he did, because he had the opportunity to pursue what he wanted. Like, so imagine Edison and Tesla. Had the shoe been on the other foot and they were forced into slavery or into manual labor, light bulb, electricity as we know it, like alternating and direct currents, Edison and Tesla, they were the forefront on that. We wouldn't have electricity as we know it without those guys. Had they been forced to be like, oh, well, you guys are really smart, you need to be doctors. Okay, they may have saved a couple hundred patients in their lives, but because of what they did to expand our knowledge of electricity and provide light bulbs and eventually what led to the entire power grid, that's millions of people are affected by that. How many hundreds of people can you be affected by in your lifetime as a doctor? Like, how many hundreds of people can you interact with as a doctor?
Yeah.
Like, maybe the really good ones, a couple thousand in a lifetime, and that's it. Edison has impacted millions of people. Hundreds of millions, because, like, who doesn't have a freaking light bulb? Who doesn't, everybody in the United States is benefiting not only the current population of 320 odd million, but everybody who has been alive from the time of Edison till now has benefited from his invention. Had he been forced to do something other than what he sought to pursue of his own free will? Now, granted, the light bulb invention goes into the Tesla debate and all that sort of, anyway. But still, there's still had they not been allowed to pursue what they wanted, humanity as a whole would be worse off. And that's the problem with positive rights. Negative rights require you to do nothing. Positive rights require you to do this thing that we've established as a right, which that's ultimately the argument against positive rights actually being rights. That's a misnomer. To call them positive rights is like, well, they're things that are called rights, but they require you to do something, therefore they can't be universally applied. They require you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. Yeah, should not be classified as rights in the same way that natural rights are classified as rights. So all of that is the foundation for so I started getting into all of the natural rights and the non-aggression principle because I'm establishing the foundation for what is legitimate authority. Legitimate authority cannot violate your natural rights, cannot violate non-aggression principle, and so your natural rights include the right to privacy, which is, okay, so Edward Snowden broke the law, but in breaking that law, did he violate someone's natural rights? No. Did he violate the non-aggression principle by releasing the confidential information of what the NSA was doing? No. The only thing he broke was the written law. But that written law is not founded upon natural rights, morality, or anything along those lines. The written law that you cannot, expose confidential information or classified information, that's intended entirely to protect the government. Okay, but if that's not violating somebody's right to life, is it? No, that's not violating somebody's right to liberty, pursuit of happiness. Is it violating somebody's right to privacy? that's where it comes into kind of like a little bit of a contest, because while it's technically the NSA's right to privacy, right, or the individuals involved, it's like, hey, how dare you violate my privacy to show that I'm up to illegal activity? That's not logically, that's an absurdity, right?
That Twitter emoji, you used to use a lot, where the thinking emoji, that's
I
perfect.
still do, yeah. Yeah, it's just like, wait a minute, how dare you violate my right to privacy to expose my criminal behavior? That's not legitimate. No, if you're doing something criminal in nature, you don't have the right to make that private. But you do have the right to have that somebody has to investigate that and prove it. So somebody has to know that you are up to no good and then investigate that proof. So under under the Bill of Rights and all that sort of thing, which were established to prevent the government from encroaching upon the citizens' natural rights, part of that is the law enforcement, any kind of federal government, any kind of agency that is designed to enforce the laws and to pursue criminal activity, they cannot take your information. They cannot monitor you. So this is what they kept saying in the chats and stuff like that. No, this is where I have a huge disagreement with them. They're attributing phone calls and emails to public discourse. Like, if you and I talking here on the stream, there's no guarantee that this is going to stay just between me and you. It's out there on the internet. It's broadcasted. This is a public space for all intents and purposes. Like, odds are it's only going to be me and you that see this, because I don't have any actual... I've got 100 subscribers that don't actually listen to anything I do or watch any of my videos. Oh, I'm hitting the 2-hour mark, so I'm hopefully we'll start wrapping up here.
Yeah.
But there's no guarantee of privacy here. So if somebody records this and starts using it, it's like, oh, I can't believe, HUMANE said this. I'm like, well, I said that on live stream. That was open to the public. Now, what we talked about before, because before we started this stream live, we talked about a subject, and we both agreed, this is not the stream for that. That's kind of, I don't know if you ended up talking about it on your other stream or not, but that's not the place for this. And we did have a little discussion prior to going live.
Yes.
Now, because that was just me and S-Man, and then one other guy joined us in there, it should be fairly
private.
Yeah, fairly acceptable that's just between the three of us talking. So anything that was said there, I don't have any issue with any of that becoming public knowledge or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we have a level of expectation that the NSA is not listening in on that and trying to find some criminal activity. It was just the three of us talking. We have a degree of privacy, of expected privacy. In the same way, if I'm on the phone, like my cell phone talking to my brother on the cell phone, that's not the same thing as me and my brother having the same conversation, like, say, at a bar or at the mall or something like that. If we're having a conversation at the mall, there's people all around. If somebody passes by and overhears our conversation, like, oh, can you believe what they just said? Well, yeah, we said that in public space. If I'm talking on my phone in a public space, like on a train or something like that, and, he's at home, well, I can't expect people around me to say, hey, excuse me, buddy, can I expect some privacy? I'm on my phone in a public place, but you can't listen in on what I'm saying. No, there's no expectation of privacy. If I'm in my own house, all by myself, and he's in his house by himself, and we're having a phone conversation, it's reasonable to expect that that's just between me and him and not the NSA. Because it doesn't matter what we're talking about. We could be talking about, jelly beans or broccoli or something stupid, but the NSA has no business being involved in that conversation. And let's say we're having a conversation, and in that conversation, we pose a hypothetical about okay, so if you were going to rob a bank, what would you do? And we propose out this whole hypothetical of how we'd rob a bank. And the NSA listening to that, and they've got their AI searching, like, oh, hey, we've got bank robbery that showed up on our report. And they start investigating that. doesn't matter if that's just a hypothetical. Well, what if, I mean, they could use that to open an entire case, but that entire conversation shouldn't have been something they had access to in the first place. By the way the Fourth Amendment is written, and by our reasonable expectation of privacy, the NSA shouldn't have had that conversation to use an AI to search for possible criminal activity to begin with. That is the fundamental problem here. Is they're collecting data, and then they scan through it later, hoping to find something. Or if they find something, then they can open up a wider investigation into that data and publicly see, or not publicly see, but they can get a court order or a warrant to see the entire conversation and the full context of it. And that has been used by the NSA and by various intelligence agencies to convict people of crimes not related to what was originally investigated. But they wouldn't have had that information, like, so let's say somebody's talking, like, because we're done, so somebody says, oh, bomb or whatever, and that triggers this AI, and they're like, oh, dude, these guys are talking about a terrorist plot or whatever, and they go in the conversation, and they get a court order. The court order gives them 5 years of my phone history, and even though they didn't find, like, oh, he was just telling a joke or whatever, I don't know if this is the exact process, but this is a potential hypothetical given the way the NSA was working. This is not, they're turning the frog gay conspiracy level nonsense. Actually, the turn of the frog gay would turn out to be correct. Anyway, this is this is not Russia conspiracy, outlandish, unreasonable stuff. This is potential for the abuse of this system. They hear a word that triggers the AI. They use that to get a judge court order. That court order says, okay, you can listen or you can review the conversations that this person has had for X number of years. Let's say just in general for the last 5 years. They look through that last 5 years, they find evidence of, oh, hey, maybe 5 years ago this guy killed a homeless guy. That's not the case. I just want to let you know, I have never killed anybody, and as far as I know, I've never plotted a terrorist attack. Wittingly or unwittingly. So this is just a general hypothetical. NSA, I know you're listening, because it's, anyway.
Quickly.
Hey, NSA people, could you all create your individual Twitter accounts and follow us and subscribe to my channel? I'd greatly appreciate it.
Anyway, but so with this, because there's examples of this, and this is why this is such a big problem, and why, found evidence for X, open the conversation, well, X didn't really actually happen, but hey, look, there's evidence for Y. Criminal investigation opens up on Y. That person goes to jail for something unrelated to the original investigation. This is not something that is specific to wiretapping into the NSA and listening on phone conversations. This happens a lot in investigations overall, and it's a bastardization of justice, because this happens where a raid on a compound will happen. Oh, hey, we suspect this guy of dealing drugs, and they raid the house, for drug charges. And while they're there, they find, oh yeah, well, by the way, illegal firearms, and by the way, they got this, and they'll throw on 15 other charges unrelated to the original incident. And you're like, oh, come on. You are only allowed to investigate that original crime, and everything else you find in it is you're not going there to specifically find that other stuff. So you're not authorized, unless it's out in the open. So there's one thing where it's okay, you have authorized to search the house or whatever, and that's anything that's publicly visible. And yet you'll see agents going through, flipping over furniture, flipping through books, trying to get access to the safe, trying to open the personal computers and stuff like that. That's not within the realms of the original search warrant. It's only stuff, if he's got a bag of heroin sitting out on his coffee table, and you go in trying to bust him on tax evasion, well, the heroin sitting on his counter, that's admissible evidence in court. That's kind of unavoidable. Now, if you opened up his safe and found his illegal firearm and heroin in there, that should not be admissible in court, although there are cases of that actually going to court. And you're like, wait, no, this was something that was not in the original warrant. You basically forced this guy to open his safe without him knowing that that's against the, Anyway, so there's there's lots of abuse when it comes to that sort of thing, where people have been, where it's a daisy chain of criminal offenses. And while yes, these people were breaking the law and they should go to jail based on breaking the law and that sort of thing, it's the potential for abuse is rampant in a system like that, because that is exactly what the SS did. And I'm not saying that the current legal system is similar to the SS. I'm saying if we allow this to happen during times of peace, during times where, somebody else gets in charge and they're managing the legal system, and they're somebody who wants to use it for nefarious activity, well, you've just paved the way to allow for that. You set the precedent for them to abuse the system. And so, like, when somebody comes on with malicious intent, they can say, oh, this guy just has an unpaid parking ticket, and then they can go in and it's like, oh, well, we found drugs on the car, and then they go and investigate more, and they just find this daisy chain of activity against you, and a minor offense has become a major felony, and you're put in jail for life. This was like, the Nazis were notorious for not only faking information, but like, hey, you did this in public, we're going to start an investigation on you. Hey, look, this investigation, hey, you're starting a resistance movement. Okay, now we've got you on the resistance, and now we're going to daisy chain this to everybody who's involved in that resistance. Like, the original infraction was something small and minor, and they are monitoring people so closely for every little thing. And so this is exactly what's going on with Trump right now. I don't know if you... So, this is a complete bastardization of justice. So what happens is Stormy Daniels violates the non-disclosure agreement. Okay, whatever, she's a terrible person. Didn't expect her to keep it anyway. But they use that investigation to start investigating Trump's lawyer. And then Trump's lawyer, because of the Stormy Daniels thing, has to admit that, yeah, he paid them off and all that sort of... That opens up an investigation into him and his practice. They use that to get all the documents from the office. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not right. And then they're trying to use that lawyer to get to Trump, and they're convinced that Trump has done something illegal. And they're using, a minor offense on the porn stars, whatever, and the investigation started off on there, and a minor offense from the lawyer, and they're using that to make this full-blown criminal investigation. You're like, that's not legit. That daisy chaining of events to take a small petty crime or a small little should be nothing incident and trying to turn that into full-blown proof of conspiracy or traitorism or whatever they're trying to, collusion. That's a bastardization of justice and an abuse of authority. It's a complete violation to the sentiment laid out in the Fourth Amendment, because the Fourth Amendment specifies warrants have to be specific in nature. There was nothing specific about the nature of them going in and getting all of the records from Trump's lawyer. There was nothing specific. They gathered all of the material. Not just material related to X event or... No, they just went in and grabbed everything. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there is any actual proof of illegal activity on Trump's part in regard to this. I don't know if he's done other illegal stuff, but this is the witch hunt mentality that's going on, and it's a violation, and it's because they're refusing to acknowledge, again, the precedent set by the NSA and the stuff that they were allowed to get away with, and the public is what pisses me off more than anything, because this information got out there, it was public knowledge, and so many people just turned a blind eye to it. And I'm like, oh, nope, that's perfectly fine. And then they say that Edward Snowden's a bad guy. And it's like, are you kidding me? It's like, there should be public outcry against our intelligence agencies based on this stuff. I'm like, no, you don't serve us. You serve your own political agenda or your own, your own pride. And they're no longer servants of the people like they're supposed to be. But the public backlash against them has been minimal. And it's because they've been allowed to do that in the past. Now they're taking it that one step further, and I'm looking at this whole Russia collusion, and I'm like, there's nothing there. You've been investigating it for 2 years, but you're so convinced that's what's going on. You're violating your own rules, what you're authorized to do, and what the people would be comfortable with doing. Now, imagine if this was you that was being pursued, which is something leftists don't do. They never put themselves in the... and so this is something I'm going off on another tangent. I was just watching John Stossel's stuff, and he was talking about one of the lecturers. I forget his name. I should drawing a blank on it. But he used to be a feminist. There's pictures of him with Gloria Steinem. But he's been talking about how the plight of men and boys is being vastly overlooked, and he's talking about male figures in the household. And one of the things that he's talking about is, and this is something Peterson has touched on as well, so because he's talked about the devouring mother and all that sort of thing. So women in general and mothers tend to try to protect their children from harm and do everything for them and shelter them, and it's because women for the most part are overly empathetic towards their kids. Whereas the father's role is to build empathy within the child. Because the father's role is to kind of let them experience more of the world and be like, hey, you can't do that, and because other people are involved. It's so what the devouring story of the devouring mother is, the mom who's too overbearing, too protective, creates this monster of a spoiled, rotten brat who doesn't care about anybody and it's just all about himself. It's all self-centered. The father's role is to counterbalance that by letting the child understand, it's not all about me. It's not all about me. Other people exist too. I have to take them into consideration. And this is why we're seeing people like social justice warriors who like, oh yeah, you hurt my feelings. I'm like, yeah, but you're not considering other people in the situation. Oh, you're not using my pronouns. My feelings are hurt. It's like, yeah, but you're requiring that other people do something they wouldn't otherwise do just to fit your needs. It doesn't work like that. Society in general doesn't. You don't get your way all the time. Other people have to agree. But that whole sense of empathy is lost. And what this guy was talking about was like, yeah, that's the role of the father, is to build empathy in the individual. The mother's role is to protect the child, whatever, and that sort of thing. The father's duty is to build empathy in a child for other people. And this is why, whenever I heard that, I was like, it all kind of clicks together. There's statistics to back this up, because fatherless households more likely to get involved in crime, more likely to do drugs, more likely to live off of the state, less likely to hold a steady job, less likely to have a steady family, less likely to be responsible to a family. All of that stems from not being empathetic towards other people. Like, if you don't care what happens to other people and you don't see them and it's all self-centered, well, yeah, you're going to take their stuff. Why does it matter? It's them, not me, who's losing their stuff. It's taking government resources. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not paying taxes. It's them, not me, so why should I care? They have no empathy for they have no empathy for, it started to sound like a rap there. Yeah, they have no empathy for the people who are the victims of what they're doing. The same thing for their families. They can abandon their family because, well, do they have empathy for the emotional plight that they're putting their family in, for the kid who's going to grow up without dad? They have no empathy for that because it was never developed in them growing up. So, why did I get talking about empathy in general here?
I'm not even entirely sure at this point. But,
because I started talking about the left and how, there's a severe lack of empathy from the left. Oh, okay, so what the left don't see is, if what's happening to Trump right now, if they were in his shoes, if they were the subject of a criminal investigation for 2 years, and they knew they were innocent. They knew there's nothing there. I mean, as far as I know, Trump has done nothing illegal in the nature as far as dealing with Russians and all that sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm operating under the assumption that he's completely innocent and all that sort of thing. And then after 2 years investigation, they should have found something instead of all this smoke instead of fire. Anyway, but imagine if they were in the same predicament, and they've got the FBI and the CIA out to prove that they did something that they know they didn't do. And with the FBI and the CIA, well, they go to their family, they go to their friends, they go to all the people, and they're trying to find information, and they're making life miserable for all those people who you surround yourself and all the people that you knew in the past. They're investigating them, and they find one thing about somebody that you loosely know, and that investigation opens up an investigation to someone that you closely know. If they were on the receiving end of this, they would be furious, and they'd be out on the streets protesting. And yet, it's the opposite. It's like, well, it's not me. It's the president. So it stems from that lack of empathy for the people who are being railroaded by our justice system, by the people who are being involved in the witch hunt. And I would go as far... So let's bring this into something a little more provable, right? So Mattress Girl and these false rape accusations, right? So Mattress Girl definitively was not raped, and yet the guy that she accused was kicked out of university.
His life is ruined. Yeah.
There's other incidents of false rape accusations where the victim wasn't raped, and the guy his name's dragged through. Like that one guy who killed himself, and then a year later his mom killed herself. Like that's I don't remember the exact names, but
Damn.
Yeah, so he was falsely accused of rape. He was kicked out of school. There was no police investigation. His life was ruined. He committed suicide a year later on the anniversary. I think it was either the day of, or maybe it's been his birthday, or maybe the anniversary of his suicide. Mom killed herself as well. That's all from fake rape accusations. Because the people making the accusations never take the time to put themselves in the other person's, like, whoa, if I was the one being falsely accused of rape and having my life ruined, they would think twice about doing it, but they don't. They don't have empathy for other people because it was never developed in them. They never bothered. They were protected by the devouring mother and effeminized men because you've seen the lefties' dads, right? Either they're absentee fathers, like not in the household at all, or they're overworked and never in the leftist lives, completely absent from the child's upbringing, or they're like these, limp-wristed sissy. You can do whatever you want. I'm not gonna correct you on anything. I'm not gonna tell you do anything wrong, dudes. And you're like, that's not a man. I don't know what that is, but it's not a man.
It's a pussy.
A man's job is to say, no, you're wrong. You need to take other people into consideration. You need to consider what other people are going through. It's not all about you. There's other people in the world. That's the role of the father. Like, there's various ways that this is enacted throughout a child's development and through the paternal bond. That is the father's goal. Like, hey, you need to experience suffering, and you need to know what it's like, so that way you don't put other people through it. You need to experience them. Like, oh, that was terrible. I never want to go through that. And you're like, oh, make sure you don't put anybody else through that. That's the father's goal, is to make that apparent. And But yeah, so as far as criminal investigations and false accusations and all that sort of thing, that would you want to be on the receiving end? And the answer for like almost everybody should be like, no, I don't want that. But for some reason with leftists, they got no problem saying, well, as long as I'm not on the receiving end, I'm perfectly fine with this happening. And you're like, what the fuck? And again, I guess that goes back into the topic of capital punishment. If you were on death row for a crime that you know you didn't commit, would you want to be that one innocent person? I mean, I don't know if it's one innocent person out of what the percentage is of false accusations, but was that the Justice Institute or, all right? Do you know what I'm talking? No, Justice Project, right?
Yeah.
where they take DNA evidence to prove like this guy couldn't possibly have done the crime that he's convicted of, and they release people.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you want to be that one guy who's like, okay, I've been in jail for 20 years for a crime I know I didn't commit? Would you want to be that guy? No. Would you want to be the guy who was executed with like, well, the evidence was all against me, but I didn't absolutely do it. The jury's just convinced of that I am, and I'm convicted on it. I didn't do it. Would you want to be the guy who goes to the electric chair without having actually done the crime? No.
Mm-hmm.
That's... Or, firing squad or whatever ends up happening. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's... And if you were the... Like, well, I guess... Here's where this doesn't quite relate to the Snowden thing. Because, like, let's say you were a terrorist and you wanted to bomb some school, and then the NSA was like, hey, we wiretapped your conversation, we busted you before you could do it. Would you want to be that No, that doesn't quite apply. No, it has some positives, like, because there have been terrorist incidents and attacks that have, plots and stuff that have been prevented by this. But it's an overboard, extreme measure in order to provide safety, and is a huge violation of privacy to ensure that safety. And this goes back to that Ben Franklin quote, those who sacrifice freedom for security shall have and deserve neither. And this path paved by the Patriot Act is a revocation of freedom for the illusion of security. And yes, it might have prevented some incidents, but it's not enough to justify the massive invasion into our privacy and to our freedom. The trade-off there is nowhere near worth the gain. And I think ultimately that makes the government more powerful, and who's to say they're not using any of this information for political gains, right? I mean, because it seems like they're definitely using wiretaps and illegally obtained documents and all that sort of thing for their political agenda against Trump. That seems to be the case. And who's to say they haven't done that in the past to minor politicians and, ruined other people's lives that we don't know about. It's what happens when you have power. It tends to be abused, right? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Lord Acton. That I don't see how you can grant somebody everybody's telephone communication and all access to their digital interactions and their email and all that sort of thing, and expect that system not to ever be abused by anyone. That's unfathomable, especially when we've got proof, thanks to Snowden, of it being abused by people. That's some of what was released. And not only were these like, hey, they're keeping track of a lot more than what they told you about, but also, yeah, here's examples of them violating the system and punishing people for, for whatever reason, or for things that for information they should have had to begin with. It's all right. So was that everything I wanted to say about this topic?
I don't know, maybe.
Oh, the last thing I want to say is that philosophy needs to be something that kids are taught in middle school and high school, and the whole foundation for natural rights and positive rights versus negative rights, all this stuff should be middle school and high school information. The fact that, because I didn't know about any of this till I was in my late 20s, like 20, 25, 26, around that range. So, no, maybe a little bit younger, maybe I was 23, but still, that's, because let's see, when did I enter the Air Force? I was 20 when I entered the Air Force in 2005. Yeah. So I was probably like 23, 24 before I started. Cause what year was that? Let's see. Because it was the 2008. So yeah, about 23. 23 when I started going down the rabbit hole, investigating libertarians and this whole philosophy, and so I must have been like 24 or 25 before I ever got to the arguments about natural rights and where rights come from, and philosophy in general. And I was like, oh, dude, that now everything makes so much more sense, and I've got a rational basis for. So things that I believed beforehand, I now have a logical foundation to prove why that's the case. And in other things, I was like, well, if other things that I believed turned out not to be the true, and yeah, I needed to change my mind about how I thought about things. It's like, okay, because based on what I know to be true, based on philosophy, what I was my original perspective, I cannot maintain. And so, this is, our education is woefully lacking in this particular area, and this is something I'm glad you're getting exposed to this, because you're kind of younger. What are you, like 18 or something like that? But
I will be 17 in 11 days.
Yeah, so almost 17. I'm glad you're at least getting your foot in the door on some of these topics, because this is stuff I didn't find out till I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I just got my foot in the door without even intending to. I just was going to be on here talking about the news, and then I got involved with more hardcore politics and some philosophy, and find it rather interesting and thought-provoking, as it does make me question a lot of things I've held for like a really long time.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're doing research, or if you're looking for more books to read, I highly read Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. Aristotle, I think, is the best of the three, but that's just my personal taste. So Pluto does makes a lot of good arguments, and he's provided a lot to the realm of philosophy. But Aristotle seems to be the king, because he seems to have taken all the good from Socrates, taken all the good from Plato, saw the flaws in Plato's thinking, and seems to have kind of like solidified. Okay, he seems to have condensed it all. Like, yeah, here we've got the accurate information. These are the, and I'd also look into John Locke, Friedrich Bastiat, not the YouTuber that we've been hanging out with, but the actual philosopher.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he uses that name, because it's like, some of the things you say, I don't think Bastiat would approve, but anyway.
The dude's probably turning over in his grave, let's be honest.
Yeah, Bastiat, because, I mean, so those will, John Locke as well, I mean, Adam Smith, so even though Adam Smith was more like economics, he also has some philosophy in there as well. Because I don't think and this is this very big overlap between economics and philosophy. It's really remarkable, it's because once you understand the economic, and this is what Mises wrote, Human Action. Once you understand the foundation of economics, you understand it's all about human interaction with each other and human choices and personal choices. So even though we quantify it with monetary and all that sort of thing, it's really about why are people making their decisions that they make. And that you can't avoid getting into philosophy once you understand that all human economy is based on people's values.
Yeah, people's values, people's worldview.
Yeah, their worldviews. So you can't escape what people will do with their money without understanding, okay, underneath all of that, their moral principles, their worldview, their philosophy of life. So you have to understand philosophy in order to understand economics. It's bizarre. I mean, it seems like you're like, wait a minute, what? How does that work together? But it seems counterintuitive, but it makes all the sense once you start looking into it. You're like, yeah, you can't avoid politics and economics being overlapped. Politics, because, well, philosophy, politics, and economics, they're all interrelated. So you'll often find people talking about all three subjects and then overlapping them. Anyway, I've been going on for about 2.5 hours, and I've been talking way too much.
Do you feel like your throat's killing you?
No, not killing me. Oh, before I forget, I did want to say some things about last week's stream, because Sinister was talking to me. So even though we talked about framing, I don't think I addressed why people would frame a conversation a certain way. So this should take maybe 5 minutes to wrap. Sorry, this is a separate topic. So I talked about examples of improperly framed arguments, because when you're talking about philosophy, it's not the what to think, it's how to think. And if you're thinking about something incorrectly, you're likely to get to the wrong what. So this is an issue that I've seen, and you can, and once you have a good foundation, it's like, okay, once you've established a good habit of critically thinking about subjects, you say, okay, this is what I believe. What does the other side believe? And what is the other side's argument? And am I representing the other side correctly? You try to understand as much about a topic as possible, which framing is intentionally... so framing can either be intentional or unintentional. Let's talk about intentionally to begin with. So, if it's intentionally shrunk to cut out a side of the argument, it's proof that the other person knows the other side has more to say on this, and if you were given the full information of both sides of the arguments, you would come to a conclusion that is different from the conclusion they want. They want a specific conclusion, so they cut the argument or frame the argument to make that conclusion seem the most likely. Whereas if you had the full barometer, you would likely come to a different conclusion. If you've got both sides and you can weigh them evenly, you're like, oh yeah, in light of all the evidence I have to side with, I'll side against abortion. Like I'm not using this because I know that this is still a heated debate and all that sort of thing. But if you only frame the argument where you're making all the positives for abortion and you're saying, well, all the other side, they just want to take away a woman's right to choose. I mean, that seems to be the framing on that particular topic. You're like, wait. One side thinks it's murder based on when life starts or when and medical science and all that sort of thing. If somebody had both your arguments as well as the other arguments, would they come to the same conclusion as you? Or is it more likely that they would either fall somewhere in between or possibly go to the opposition? Well, that's why you're framing your argument in such a narrow way, because you don't want the possibility of somebody falling in the middle or somebody possibly going to the other side. That is a very dishonest way of doing that to get people to view the world the way you do. This is essentially propaganda, right? If you're only shown one side of an argument, you're likely to believe that side. But if you're given both sides and you're able to choose, like, oh, well, if I've got the two options as opposed to just the one, well, let's see, which option is better? And I think in my particular position, maybe option 2 is better. And they're like, no, you're supposed to choose option 1. You have to choose option 1. The other times this does occur unintentionally, but often when it's unintentional, it's because somebody has been the subject of propaganda. Like, this is what we're seeing in universities, where a lot of the professors are highly left-leaning, and all of their students, they're teaching them only from the leftist perspective. They're demonizing one side and glorifying the other, and they're not presenting both arguments accurately, and they're not presenting the full arguments from both sides. And so people are coming out of these universities only with the lefty mentality, and when they get into arguments, they argue based on that. And when you try to present any arguments to the opposite, like, no, that's not true. That's all BS. You can't apply that here because that's, and like, what? That comes from indoctrination and propaganda that they've been experiencing for decades in their adult life. So if you only ever heard one side for years and then you start to hear both sides, you kind of change your mind. But they've also been told not even to bother listening to the other side, so that makes it very difficult to have a open discussion about both sides because they're so convinced the other side is absolutely evil and their side is right. And it's like, well, so I hope I've never been in that position, and I try to check myself and make sure that I am not arguing from that perspective. I try to make sure that I understand both sides to the best of my ability, and I choose the side that makes either more sense or is correct based on the information I have. And that's something we all need to check ourselves. We all need to make sure that we don't ever fall into the trap of only presenting one side. So, yeah. So it took a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but I just wanted to make sure that was the entire purpose of last week's stream. And the entire purpose of this week's stream was talking about legitimate authority has to be based on natural rights and non-aggression principle and morality that stems from all of that. Anytime it doesn't, it's violating people's rights. And that's when you get abuses of authority, And that's when you get violent revolutions and complete chaos and disaster, which we want to avoid as much as possible.
Yep.
So I think that was everything. I did most of the talking. Sorry, yes, man, and then you were gone for an hour or so of me rambling about things.
Yeah, because when I'm the host, I try to let the others speak and let them kind of vent why they're thinking the way they do.
All right. So I think I've solidified my thoughts and gotten them out there, and that's what these streams are for. I don't care if anybody else watches them or if I don't get any viewers or even if I'm wrong on things. What matters is my thoughts are out there. They're there for other people to view, and hopefully other people will see and arrive at the same conclusion and be like, okay, you're right. Or, which would be even better, is if somebody comes along and it's like, no, you're wrong, and here's why. That I'm waiting for somebody to come along and provide me that, because you saw that with we were talking about,
BTK.
yeah, well, BTK, and also on the Google, or sorry, the YouTube and Twitter, or not Twitter, we were talking about Alex Jones, and I was like, oh, no, actually, based on what you're saying, yeah, you're right. Who's that? Was that JP?
Yeah, JPM.
Yeah.
Something versus, that one case in Alabama. Yeah.
Yeah. He was completely in the right there and changed my mind. And so I hope that is more. I want to see other cases where, like, yeah, okay, you're right. I was in the wrong on this. Based on this new information, I have to change my opinion. I have to change my position on this, and this is correct.
All right, hang on.
So hopefully there's more of that. But I think this is time to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm being told I should check the chat. Hang on, let me check the chat of your stream.
Oh, that's all new. Okay. So DarkCon says, "Hey S-Man, ignore my Twitter DMs. Sorry about spamming you there. I didn't realize you were still on the call with HUMANE. How's it going, guys? In the process of making dinner. Blah 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 blah. No, BTK didn't actually join up. And John Stossel's all right for a Fox host. Well, yeah, he was a member of Fox Business, which is not the same thing as Fox. I mean, they're tied to each other, but the Fox Business seems to lean more libertarian because they've got Judge Napolitano, Kennedy, and Stossel all had shows on there, and they are definitely libertarian leaning as opposed to staunch Republican like O'Reilly and some of the other Fox talking heads. But John Stossel has left Fox Business, to the best of my knowledge, and is now, let's see, I like John Stossel a lot, but Reason has been pissing me off lately. But the video, he's got his own YouTube channel, John Stossel now, and that's what I've been watching, because, I mean, little similar to Prager University, little 4 or 5 minute videos, really well made. But he does have a little bit of a partnership with Reason, which the videos that they make on his site that are uploaded on Stossel are really good. So, because I saw his interview with Steven Crowder, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize he had his own YouTube channel and stuff. So I started checking that out. But yeah, that's really good stuff. His channel is libertarian minded, and he's also got Stossel in the Classroom, which I think is amazing. It's a not-for-profit charity. Teachers can come in and ask to show his videos in their classrooms, and they talk about all, economics, politics, and all stuff from a libertarian perspective. That's amazing. So as far as I know, Stossel has left Fox and is now his own independent thing on social media. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this stream is only one person talking right now. No, S-Man did not fall asleep. He left for another stream.
Yeah.
I was not reading at the chat. I checked the chat at around the 1 hour mark. Didn't see anybody, so I kind of minimized it and out of sight, out of mind. Sorry.
Yeah. I had to leave to do an off-air hangout, and then afterwards I came back and.
Yeah. So women can do a man's job too. Yes and no. So there are examples of very strong female figures, and I would say Ben Carson's mom was like this, because she put that hand of authority down, that discipline, and rather than sheltering him from the world, forced him to grow up and to be the man that he is now. And he's praised her for that. And at the time, I'm sure he was mad and he was angry. He's talked about being getting violent with his mom and things like that. But now he looks back and he's like, yeah, she saved me from being a degenerate, and now he's a world-renowned neurosurgeon. That wouldn't have happened without that strong female figure that would actually instill discipline rather than trying to protect him from everything. She was preparing him for adult life, and ensuring that he was, that he understood what life was about, and that everybody has to, that empathetic, what we talked about earlier, that empathy. Women like that are few and far between. I'm not saying that women are incapable of that. I'm saying as a general trend, looking at statistics and what men tend towards and what women tend towards, this is talking about personality traits, talked about by Jordan Peterson and various other psychologists. Steven Pinker also talked about this sort of thing. This is when you're talking about general trends, when 95-ish plus of all men tend to be more like, oh, let the kid go out and play and eat dirt and skin his knee, and when most fathers exhibit those behavior, and that only 5% is kind of like, oh, I got to protect my child from everything and he can't eat dirt, and when only 5% are like that, you're like, okay, men tend to be towards this. And when it's the exact opposite for women, where they tend to shelter, oh, my poor baby, and you're like, dude, he's 22, your poor baby nothing, he's an adult, let him be a man, let him be his own person, stop babying him. That's, when 95% of women act like that, you can't count on that 5% of women, that are saying, no, you need experience life, you need to grow up and be you can't account for that 5%. I don't think it's exactly 5%, I'm just making generalizations here, but it's the general trend that women tend to be more sympathetic. Men, no, wait, what's the word? Yeah, sympathetic versus empathetic, right? Empathetic is your ability to, what's the word? No. So, men tend to teach their children more about empathizing with others. Women tend to teach their children more about, you're special, you matter. Because if you're only taught one perspective, like if you're only taught to empathize with other people, you may, that's the altruism, oh, I'm going to sacrifice of myself always, and you become a schlub, you become a slave. Everything is about other people and never about you, and you sacrifice and bleed yourself for other people, and then you have nothing to show for it, and you're miserable. So you have to understand that you matter too, that you are important, that you need to do things for yourself, but you also understand in doing things for yourself, you have to, that also means doing things for other people and taking their considerations, their feelings into account. And it's not all about you, because when it becomes all about you, that's a problem. And it's that balance between the two, like what Peterson is talking about with the yin and the yang. How much is it, okay, I need to make sure that I don't get abused and that I don't get drained and that I don't get, everything. What the heck? Phone again. You got to make sure that your life, you got to make sure that your life isn't so bad that you don't get anything out of it. But you also have to make sure that you aren't making it so that other people's lives is miserable, and you got to have that balance between the two, which is why the male, or the father figure and the mother figure both working together as a family unit produces the best offspring. I mean, statistically, you're less likely to do drugs, more likely to finish high school, more likely to hold a steady job, more likely to have a stable family. It's, there's so many metrics about, men and women creating more well-rounded offspring, I should say. All right, anyway, HUMANe, are you for capital punishment, death penalty? No, I am not, because on the off chance you get it wrong. That's, in principle, yes. But, dude, understanding how bad bureaucrats are at doing their job, I would rather have 100 criminals sit in jail than to have one innocent person die.
I heard the saying is you'd rather have 10 guilty go free than one innocent suffer.
Yeah, same principle. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather not have them go free, but yeah, it's because you're like, well, that's more likely to cause more suffering and more pain. But yeah, it's to the point where I'd because you're talking about capital punishment. Yeah, I'd rather have nobody who is innocent go to jail. But yeah, it's if it came down to it, and we had to be like, okay, either let them free, or yeah, I'd rather have the 10 guilty people go free than one innocent man be convicted, wrongfully convicted. That's yeah. But I think with the capital punishment, it's like, okay, well, our system is not ever going to be perfect, and we know that some innocent people are going to be wrongfully convicted, but we don't want anybody on death row. I don't think we should have anybody on death row on the possibility that one of them could be wrongfully convicted. Now, if it's something where the guy is caught in the act, like one of those stupid school shooter idiots, or the Madden dude, we know you did it. We caught you red-handed. I've got no problem with the death penalty for that guy. So, those situations, death penalty all the way. Yeah, there's no doubt that he is guilty. There's no possible way that he is an innocent being wrongfully punished by the system. Read the chat. I'm doing that right now. Sorry. Anyway. He got introduced to War Corps. That's how he got more. Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
Sorry that was your introduction. From what I've seen of War Corps, he's kind of a moron.
He's a funny type of moron. There are some things where he's definitely wrong on, and then there's others where I'm like, I get the sentiment, but I think you're not approaching this the right way. And goddamn, it was just. Did you change your mind on anything? Wait, let me see.
Oh, based on Ham's arguments, to the best of my knowledge, no.
The reason TV pisses me off on immigration, I'm not seeing their video, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. So
the women doing the women doing
thing.
The women doing man's job was supposed to be a joke humane. Should Parkland shooter Nick Cruz be given the death penalty like he's been considered for?
Yeah, for him, yes. Although I would not use his name. That's not like, oh, how dare you use his name. I was just like, yeah, in the future, I make it a personal let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Policy? Yeah, personal policy to never use a shooter's name. If you're talking about them, you insult them. Like, so, yeah, should the Parkland shooter fuckface McGee be given the death sentence? Yes. Yes.
Honestly?
If you could kill him 100 times over, yes. That's, like, kill him, revive him, kill him again, revive him. Yeah, as long as you could keep that up. That is what should happen there.
The only way I can imagine you even being able to do that is if you electrocute him, he's knocked out. You bring him back, and basically he'll get second and third degree burns on his chest, but I mean,
yeah. Or can we waterboard dudes like that? Just
I was gonna say that.
Waterboard them and then electrocute them. I'm pretty sure that guy deserves nothing in the form of humane treatment.
He'll get the humane treatment from Humane Mind.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's no humanity in that person, so not deserving of humane treatment. Yeah. You can't inflict that much pain and suffering on the world and then expect to be like, oh, just slap on the wrist. No, you're out of here. Now, okay. So as I say those things, that's how I feel personally. Like, that's what I would like to see happen. Now, were that up for debate and were there a court and a verdict? No, I would have to side of my principle as opposed to my personal feelings and be like, no. Death sentence, yes. Kill him, get him out of the picture. But as far as the whole torture thing, that's my own personal feelings, and I have to take those out of the equation when if I was actually deciding this person's fate. It'd be like, no, just get it over with quick and clean, as quickly and clean as possible. And be done with it. But personally, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get the batteries and attach those things to his nipple. Yeah, that's.
Oh my god, humane! Holy.
What, the car battery? No, okay, that's the thought that goes through your head, right? You're like, oh, dude, this guy. Yeah. Well, I don't know. The same thing when you're talking about pedophiles. You're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So pedophiles. Okay, I think we need to get a device, attach his ding to a bumper, and then drive, and then have that car steadily accelerate until he can no longer hold on. That's I. What is that not? Is that not what goes through everybody else's head? Because I mean, that's kind of like, hey, I'm all for. But then morality takes in and is like, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but we can't do that. That makes us. While that doesn't make us as bad as the perpetrator, that's still not good for us as a whole to if we were to engage in those kind of barbaric practices. So we need to, just a quick lethal injection, or or even lifetime imprisonment. That's the sort of thing you're like, okay, we need to make the lizard brain, I should say, like, because that's what it's been called. Like, that's the more primal nature of man. It was called the lizard brain by, I think, Freud. That is we need to punish them we need to make sure that they suffer eternal. That's the rationally based on morality. That's not something we can sign off on.
Yeah. Hey, Lolly, we're live on HUMANE's channel.
Well, I'm trying to wrap this up, but in trying to wrap it up, we've gone for like almost actually 30 minutes.
Oh my God, DarkCon.
The Mike Pence treatment. You know what? Fucking hell. I will second that, DarkCon. Out of context, that'll make me sound like a huge piece of shit. In context, they'll all agree with me.
Oh yeah. Well, see, the conversion therapy thing with Mike Pence is what's that called? Like it's not an exaggeration, but it's a what's
Are you
the
trying
word?
to say fabrication? Do you think it's a fabricated thing?
Yeah, because he never actually endorsed electroshock conversion therapy. He was just saying if there was some way, so if you look at what he actually said on the subject and what he actually voted, you're like, oh, well, that's not so terrible. But it seems like they're like, oh, I can't believe he wants to electrocute gays. And I'm like, what? Because, so even Blair White, who I extremely disappointed given the whole Candace Owens situation, all that sort of thing. And I've talked about that in previous streams. But Blair White has said if there was some kind of pill or something to cure the gender dysphoria and make Blair more normal, that Blair would do it. And other people are like, oh, well, Blair supports electrical shock therapy. And that's the equivalent of what Mike Pence was talking about. I was like, yeah, if there was some kind of treatment that did work and it was effective, and like some kind of pill or some kind of therapy, like some kind of talking with the person, and if that worked, okay, then we should do that. That helps the person. And people are like, oh, he wants to torture them and put them in internment camps, and it was like, no, what? Well, how did you get that out of what he said and what they actually stood for? Well, people have made the same claims about Blair, and that's why I was making the example. It's like,
yeah, because deviance is not. I mean, it's not something you need to be ashamed of, but at the same time, it's like, why? It's not something you need to be proud of either. It is what it is.
Yeah. So it's not like you should be punished for it. Like, well, it's like punished for that deviant behavior, provided that deviant behavior is voluntary on everybody involved. Because it'd be one thing for a gay person to have sex voluntarily. It'd be a whole another thing. Like, well, he was gay, but he raped another dude. Oh, but he's a gay. Don't punish him. Like, no, that doesn't work. You can't use that as a defense for violating other people. But
no, I mean, I'm a deviant, and it's just like I'll just take the attitude that's okay, don't be ashamed of whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, you're deviant because of your memes. That's the only reason you are deviant.
That's what that means.
So that deviance should not something to be ashamed of or be condemned and like, oh, how dare you, you need to be punished and put away and locked away. It's like, no, but if there is a way to help you to either live a more normal life or to become closer to the norm, because as studies have shown that like when it comes to suicide rates, when it comes to domestic violence and all this sort of thing, people who are deviant, they're outside of the norms in that as well when it comes to violence and
it's not something that we should
depression.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that we should wrap ourselves up in too much. I mean, even
Yeah.
if it's a thing like that, like you might not necessarily want like a cure or anything like that, but you just sort of think, okay, there's no point in kind of wrapping
Yeah.
yourself up in your own kind of identity, sexual identity. It's
Yes.
just because other people just don't really. The reaction is people just don't give a fuck.
Yeah, that so that wasn't my original position when it came to all that, but that is now my position. It's like, yeah, I just don't care. Just go off, do your own thing by yourself. Just leave me out of it. Okay. As long as I don't have to participate, as long as I don't have to watch it, as long as you're not doing parades in public where you got children running around, what the yeah. That's where I'm like, okay, that needs to stop. How is that allowed? The gay pride parades where the dudes are running around in a sock.
Cover it up in a fursuit.
Well, the dudes are running around in nothing but a sock, and little kids are walking by. And in some of these things, the little kids are being encouraged to participate in this, like the drag queens and the Desmond and all that sort of thing. Topic for another show, another stream. We're not gonna get into into the little kid drag queen here. Ugh. But yeah, that's where it's like, that's a problem. Okay, and so Dark Khan says, I say, if homosexuality is a sin according to God, then yeah. Peaceful, consensual conversion of LGBTs, but it's not, if it's not a sin, then I don't care. So yeah, I'm of the position, I don't care what you do, but I would advise against it. So I am advising from a moral perspective and all that sort of thing. If you can, I would advise against participating in any of that deviant. So for your in particular situation, you're just asexual, no problem there. But if it came down to somebody has homosexual tendencies and whether to engage in homosexual acts or not, I would say avoid it at all, if at all possible. Like, saying like I treat it as a overall negative. But if you're not going to listen to my advice and avoid it, then don't make me a part of it. I would rather not have you participate in that and have you live in what is essentially closer to the norm as far as sexuality and all that sort of thing. I'd rather you be part of the, was it 97% of heterosexuals and all that sort of thing? But if you're not in that camp, what can I do? I can only say that I disapprove of that lifestyle, and that's it. If you don't listen to that, if that disapproval doesn't mean jack shit to you, then oh well. I'm not going to strong arm you like, no, you have to. This is a sin. How dare you? And I'm like, well, that's your life, your choices. You're free to make.
Yeah,
those.
I mean that sounds something. I think a libertarian position like that's a healthy enough position.
Yeah, I can be against something, but still be like, okay, it's your life. You're free to make those choices.
Yep,
right.
Just cover it up in a fursuit though.
Oh my.
No. Furries are not allowed. I'm pretty sure furries have to be torched at the stake.
Furries. Pinochet should have targeted furries, anime lovers, and whoever the fuck invented pineapples. If they could somehow have invented it in the 70s.
What?
Yes.
No. All right. Okay. Sorry. S-Man, you are officially kicked off of the stream. You're not allowed any time back, and I would rather have Ham on these streams than you because of your stance on pineapple. I just
because I miss like having Ham on these particular. I know you don't like him, HUMANe, but it's
It probably made these more entertaining, but man, it
is entertaining.
Yeah, I do need other people who disagree with me, but I'd rather have like Blue or BTK disagreeing with me because they seem because at least they can present their cases without just deferring completely to emotion and without going and without doing circular logic. I'm like, dude, you're arguing from your conclusion all the time. You cannot use your starting statement as your conclusion and also your supporting evidence. It doesn't work like that. Anyway, it's just a joke. You're allowed back. I don't know why you hate pineapple, but
it makes
you're missing out.
Taste. It makes the pizza taste fucking horrible.
You mean amazing? You said horrible. You mean amazing?
That makes the pizza makes the pineapple taste horrible.
No, okay. Well, have you had? So you're eating. So you it's regular pizza with tomato sauce. Is that the problem? Have you ever had the barbecue sauce on the pizza with pineapple?
I've tried it with various things. It was fucking
Oh.
horrible. I tried barbecue, which is on its own is pretty fucking great. I've tried various things. And I'm like, I even
Okay.
just ate straight up pineapple, both canned and just cutting it from the pineapple. I was like, how the fuck can you people like this? Holy
Okay,
hell!
you just don't like
Because
pineapples in
because
general.
you
What
obviously
the-
haven't visited. If you don't like pineapples, then maybe you haven't had the right ones yet.
Yeah,
Well, you
maybe
haven't-
maybe you
you
got to
haven't
go to
visited-
Hawaii and try one right off the tree.
Oh,
Well,
aloha then.
come to my state where we grow a lot of pineapples in my state. In Australia, that's because we've got this thing called the big pine. You know how you got the big thing, in every state. Like one state's got the big nut, and then the other state's got the big banana.
Oh,
Like where
okay.
the,
Like Georgia is the peach, and yeah,
Yeah,
You
and,
know,
and Idaho's
I-
potatoes. Yeah, so you got like
Queensland's has got the big pineapple, so it's a walk-in pineapple.
oh okay. So like
And it's next door to a nut factory, so we get to have these like Sundays where these
pineapples
kind
and
of
nuts.
ice cream Sundays where you can have pineapples and then nuts. But then the day they ran out of nuts, they were like, "Oh, we don't have nuts." And I said, "You live next door to a nut factory, connected with a train that's made of macadamia nuts."
Wait, made of macadamia nuts?
Oh no, it's shaped like a nut.
Oh, okay.
So it's called the nut train.
Well, yeah, I don't know why you don't like pineapples, but pineapples make me nut.
Jesus Christ!
Oh my god. You're ruining like the state of Queensland.
Holy fuck! That okay. So
All
so
right.
now I question what HUMANe does in his spare time after the stream.
Nothing but pineapple.
HUMANe nutted in a pineapple, basically.
So yeah, I can't watch SpongeBob for. Never mind. Well, he lives in a pineapple under the sea. No, never mind.
Lives in a pineapple under HUMANE seaman.
Yeah.
Let's dare you.
Yeah. No,
so this
I
just turned very degenerate.
anyway, so about SpongeBob, I did the theme song for that. That is it perfect for a cadence, like we just talked about marching cadence. It matches perfectly with that. So we did one kind of like a fun. I think it was like the entire base was doing marching, and so I tried to do that, but nobody got the what they were supposed to do. So, because when you're doing cadences or whatever, the instructor says something, and then the troop is supposed to respond. Because you've seen Full Metal Jacket and stuff like that, right? So, well, my mom told me, they chant back. So all they were supposed to say was the name of the base, which was Gunter Annex instead of SpongeBob SquarePants, and nobody got that. And so I was just kind of like, oh well, I was kind of just yelling at myself there while giving the cadence. Well, screw you guys too. I thought it was awesome. I was like, oh, dude, this song lines up perfectly. Yeah, I do like pineapple and pineapple on pizza, and I do not like coffee.
Coffee is disgusting, so that we can agree on.
Okay. We found some common ground. That's good. And that's, I think, what we'll end the stream on. We found some common ground that coffee is gross. It smells amazing, but doesn't taste the way it smells. It's so, so sad.
I tried coffee on, I went to a funeral. At the funeral home, they offered me some coffee. I'm like, yeah, fuck it, why not? Whoever the fuck made that coffee, they should have been in the fucking casket.
Yeah.
So disgusting.
So even like the most expensive and like the really good coffees is just kind of really. I'd rather have tea or like hot chocolate or anything else other than coffee. Anyway, that's gonna be it for the stream. Unless Lonely Wolf wants to say anything. Yeah, sorry for.
Oh, not really.
Yeah, we were trying to wrap up the conversation when Dark Khan loves his coffee, but oh well. Who cares what you love, Dark Khan? This is all about us. You don't matter.
Yeah.
Anyway. I think that's gonna be it. So I'm gonna thanks for joining me, everybody who stuck it out for the full 3 hours. I'm trying to get these under 2 hours, and it just hasn't been working.
Rip.
But I got everything I wanted to say out there, and at least I consolidated my thoughts, and I got some jokes in there. All right, bye.